Friday, Senator Elizabeth Warren will be here with us for an hour to take your questions and ours. Yesterday, the FBI executed a warrant and searched Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, including, according to him, breaking open a safe. The New York Times reports the focus seems to be on classified papers the former president took with him when he left office. I know we're knee-deep in the minutiae of the Trump saga here on this show, but I just want to highlight one key point here. The FBI, under the leadership of Trump-appointed Christopher Wray, got a warrant to search the home of a former president of the United States. So in a couple of minutes, we'll open the phone and text lines to get your reaction to the seeming escalation of the various investigations into Trump. Will this, the removal of official records, if it's true, be the thing that takes him down? What impact will it have on the January 6th committee? Will this even matter in the eyes of his most ardent supporters? What's your take? We'll get to your takes in a couple of minutes at 877-301-8970. But first, we're joined by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's now a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Good morning, Judge Gertner.
Good morning.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Judge Gertner. So, what does this mean?
I've always mentioned that's the worst question to ask someone. Complicated situation, what does it mean? But I'm happy to answer.
Sorry.
Let's start off with, this was a search warrant issued by a federal judge that had to have been picked over by Merrick Garland. And the reason why I say that is that Garland is widely known as a micromanager. And so while a search warrant doesn't have to be approved typically by the Attorney General, I am speculating, and I think it's a reasoned speculation, that this probably was because of the enormity of it. Mm-hmm. And what's likely to be in the search warrant? The search warrant affidavit, which is the rationale for the search warrant, sounds like, from reporting, that there's probable cause to believe that there were documents that Trump had no right to hold on to, but which he did. What are the nature of those documents? That could be any of the things that presidents are supposed to preserve. But my speculation, again, because we know nothing, is that it's probably classified information, because the question is whether they would take a step like this if you're just talking about a letter that Kim Jong-un wrote to him that he just didn't turn over, or whether you're talking about classified documents.
So I have I'm sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, speculating further, again, what some of the reporting suggests is that, the documents that were finally turned over, this 15 boxes of documents which Trump had carted off to Mar-a-Lago and which were the FBI agents retrieved, this is before the search warrant, from the home, I would bet made it clear that there were documents that were not included. Mm-hmm. In other words, and I'm just making this up now, you have page 7 but no page 9. And then from the reporting again, the FBI agents actually physically went to Mar-a-Lago and may have seen something or been shown something which provided probable cause to believe that there was more there. But we're all speculating. The affidavit will one day be public. The search warrant will be filed with the court, and the return on the search warrant, the listing of what they've gotten, will be filed with the court unless it's clear from the face of the document that it contains classified information, in which case they would try to impound it.
So the only question I can come up with, Judge, is what does that mean? No, I'm only kidding. So, Judge Gertner, if Trump hadn't put out his own statement saying this happened yesterday and that they broke into his safe, we wouldn't even know about it at this time. Is that right?
Well, we wouldn't have known about it from official sources.
Right.
There would have been people who would have observed, black cars going into Mar-a-Lago. But no, he was the one who blew the whistle here.
And a couple, going back to the request for a warrant from a judge like you used to be, the probable cause that the applicant for the warrant needs to meet is probable cause that what? That that a crime has been committed and that justifies the search.
It's probable cause to believe that evidence of a crime will be at that location.
I see. Okay, and when they get there, the thing that, in terms of searches, when a warrant is issued, if that's the proper verb, and a search is going on, what's this thing about if documents or evidence is in, what is the expression, clear view? When
Right,
the search,
plain view.
Explain that, can you?
Well, so let's say I search your house, Jim, and I'm searching for, I don't know, stuff that you stole. The Elgin marbles are in your house, and I have probable cause to believe that they're there. And while I'm there, I actually see a Rodin, which I know you had no right to have. I could seize that too.
Okay.
So it's, you're going in on X, Y, and Z for which you have probable cause to believe were the instrumentalities, the fruits of a crime. And then while you're there, you see something else, which you have to believe were also the fruits of a crime. In other words, I can't just take your file unless I believe that there's stuff in your file that is also for which I have probable cause to believe is a crime. It usually applies to, drugs. I see drugs on your table. Mm-hmm. But in this situation, it would be I'm looking for classified information, and here I see a text message to Alex Jones, telling him to go to the Capitol.
Got it.
That could be probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed. So yes, the initial entry into the door enables you to, as long as you stay within the scope of your search, enables you to pick up anything else that might be evidence of a crime. But let me say, there has to be, again, probable cause to believe a crime has been committed, and then the warrant has to describe what you're searching for with, as the law says, particularity, and where they are to be, where the search is to take place has also been described. I'm only speculating that every I is dotted and T is crossed in this warrant.
We're talking to a retired federal judge, Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner, I heard a lot on television last night. I read a lot this morning. The idea that, as you said, Garland is a very careful man, micromanager. I remember we heard a lot of great things about Mueller and how he was going to, he wouldn't do this if not for that, and he wouldn't do this, and he had this great reputation and stuff. But I was wondering, and maybe I'm all wet about this, but they got 15 boxes of documents from Mar-a-Lago back in January. They retrieved these documents. Apparently there were more agents looking for more things in the spring, and there was talk about what Trump was willing to give up and what he wasn't willing to give up. I'm wondering if it could be as disappointing as Merrick Garland thinking that because some of these documents might have had something to do with foreign governments, troop movements, Russia, Ukraine, or something, that he almost had to do this, and this is, again, pure speculation, but because were those documents to be given away by the president, not having done it would have made the DOJ look awful, so his hand was almost forced, and that maybe we're all worked up about not that much here.
Well, his hand was certainly forced by the National Archives, so there would have been a report from the archives that that stuff was incomplete. Things had not been turned over and things were incomplete. And bear in mind, we're not just talking about classified information, although that would have justified this extraordinary step. But you're talking about records which the president is supposed to keep that will enable historians and the public to understand what happened during his tenure. It doesn't have to be classified information. But it may be that he had to do this because of a report from the National Archives that what they got was incomplete. I suspect that the agents who had visited Trump on this issue, and there had been a visit, may have seen something else. But I can't say I agree with this, although this case tests my agreement. Not unusual for the government, to go after, I hate this analogy, but forgive me, Al Capone for tax evasion because they couldn't get him for killing people. Yeah. This may seem to everyone like, technicality, tax evasion, but that may be what they have. But if there's other information in there that is relevant to other crimes, they certainly could look at it. But it can't just be, gee, this might be interesting. The plain view, otherwise, search warrants would be an excuse to look through everybody's files. It can't just be, while we're here, we might as well go through everything. They have to be searching for what the warrant says they have authority to search for, and in the course of that, if they see something else that conveys probable cause to believe it was an instrumentality of a crime, it was part of a crime, then they can seize it. But I would imagine, just again I'm speculating, that because of the enormity of this, these agents knew that they had to be extremely careful. It's also not unusual, by the way, you're not so sure you have probable cause to seize X document, which you saw in the search, and then you'll apply for another warrant once you get additional information saying, hey, I know that this piece of information is there.
You know, Judge, it's not a defense for Trump to say that he filed everything carefully in the toilet at Mar-a-Lago, is it? Okay, it's two very quick questions before we let you go. Did you, when you were a federal judge and a warrant was, obviously this is an extraordinary one because the former president, was it pro forma for you to sign off on a warrant if federal authorities said they had probable cause, or are these things scrutinized really carefully by the likes of you?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. Yeah, it's scrutinized carefully, but you are overwhelmingly dependent upon what the agents have presented
Right, of course,
to you.
that's a good point.
And so you're essentially looking at it and saying, hey, if this is true, yeah, you have probable cause to search. God knows, I hope it's true. We have two examples of defective warrants that should be part of this conversation. One was the recent one, the Breonna Taylor situation, where the state officials, state police officers went into her home based on a warrant that was based on a lie. Mm-hmm. And surely that can happen. Not likely with this case, given the enormity of it and the scrutiny that the agents know they will ultimately be under. The other one was the FISA warrant. You remember the Foreign Intelligence
Secret
warrant?
court, right?
That's right, which had been issued for based on the Steele dossier, and the IG determined that it should not have been based on that. I think that was a Manafort warrant, but I'm not sure. But in any event, sure, the data on which the warrant is based, you don't do an independent investigation when you're a federal judge. You take it, you look at it, you see if it's credible, and then you see if it's credible. Whether it amounts to probable cause to search. And as I said, I'm only assuming, but one never knows, that that the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed here.
Last thing quickly, it's hard to say quickly if you can. There's a debate on the pages of the New York Times as to whether or not, if Trump were to be charged under the law that is relevant here about classified documents you're not supposed to be taken away, and convicted, that he could be barred from holding federal office. Which side do you come down on?
I'm torn. Let me put it this way. There's a statute that seems to suggest that if he defaced, mutilated, or did something to documents that he had no right to do to, on its face, the statute says that he's barred from office. That's what it says. The debate is whether or not Congress can change the qualifications for the presidency when the only qualifications listed in the Constitution are, American citizen, certain age. And so that's a debate. So if they tried to bar him from office based on a conviction of this, we would be in litigation for the next millennia. I don't know where it would come out, but from my, our reading of this Supreme Court, I don't think it would bar him from office.
Judge Gertner, as always, we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you very much. That was retired federal judge Nancy Gertner giving us her time and opining. I don't like that word.
I hate that word.
Okay, I shouldn't have said
So
it.
why'd you say it? You don't like it? I don't like it?
Just kind of came out, slipped right out there, giving us her opinion and thoughts on the search warrant, which many people are calling a raid, yesterday at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, Palm Beach, where the president has his longtime home. He was in New York City. As we know, apparently his son Eric alerted him to the agents arriving there, and we saw a picture of at least one person at the gates of Mar-a-Lago next to a black SUV with a long gun in his hands.
We're taking a break.
We are taking a break. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live, as we do every Friday, from the Boston Public Library. No tickets needed. You can just show up, stay as long as or as little as you like. We'll be right back.
Barriers at the beach. We began investigating, and it started a conversation.
So I'm going to read you Sarah from West Roxbury, her
Yep.
text. We, the taxpayers, subsidize the flood insurance and rebuilding costs of these beach properties. Thus, arguably, we are part owners of these coastal homes, and we should have beach access.
Colleen from Mattapoisa. Hi, Colleen.
I certainly can be sympathetic to that, but we have to recognize that tax dollars will never benefit everyone equally.
We'd
So
love to hear more from you.
right now-
Visit gbhnews.org/beach.
Support for our programs comes from you and Shriners Children's Boston. Accidents happen, and when those accidents involve a burn injury of any size, Shriners Children's Boston is the place to turn for any burn. Shriners Children's Boston, the most amazing care anywhere. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Brady and Marjorie. We're live at the Boston Public Library, as we are every Tuesday and Friday. So you heard what Judge Gertner thinks. What do you think about this search warrant? I mean, you know what? You can't... A search warrant was granted and executed
I know.
at the residence of a former president of the United States. By the way, almost every text, which is not very helpful, refers to either toilets or ketchup stains. We're trying to have a serious conversation here about, and by the way, missing cash from Wawa. I wonder what
Yeah.
that's about when Marjorie alleges that I stole money and goods
That's
from
right.
a Wawa supermarket
That's
when I
the
was in
story.
college.
That's the straight
So
story.
what do you think
Jim.
about this? I mean, you know, even if you haven't reached a conclusion about where this leads, what the impact's going to be, will he be barred from office? What will the reaction be of big-time Trump supporters? I guess we probably know the answer to that. I hope people are stepping back. A very cautious attorney general who's been criticized for his caution apparently signed off on a request for a search warrant at the home of a former president. It is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And I am no fan of President Trump
I didn't
and
know
have
that.
had a fantasy for years of seeing him heading off to the big house. On the other hand, I thought that it was a big deal that Mueller found 10 counts of obstruction of justice in the Mueller report, and everybody said that was no big deal. I thought the fact that he was helping out the
You're right.
Russians, during the election to get himself elected was a big deal. I thought the first impeachment was a big deal. I thought the second impeachment was a big deal. So all of these things that seem to have brought down bigger people than he is seem not that effective against President Trump, who said, as we all recall, that he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't matter. And so far, he's been right and the rest of us have been wrong. So I don't know. You heard Republicans saying that if this is a case of government overreach, if this is a case of Merrick Garland just trying to make sure he's doing everything correctly, crossing T's and dotting I's, it will hand the president the nomination of
I'm
the GOP
sorry.
party.
I tell you, the one thing I disagree with you on thoroughly is what you said to Judge Gertner a few minutes ago about maybe the Justice Department, the FBI's hands were they had no choice because there may be classified documents that could be turned over. They did have a choice. When you're going for a warrant against a president of the United States, it has never been done in the history of this country. Different rules apply.
Well, maybe
and I
you're
am
right.
of the opinion
But what do
that
they
he
do?
never would have done it.
But what do they do if he had things in there that were deemed to be national security risks, that were deemed to put our American troops in danger, or our
They
relations with
ignored
other
it
countries?
for a year and a half. So why it can't ignore it a little bit longer? What
Well,
the hell's different?
it wasn't a year and a half. It was
It was a
January.
year and a half. He left office in January of 20, whatever it was, and that's a year and a half,
apparently
21.
during these last months, they've been talking about giving things back that he shouldn't have taken, and it's possible they had to do this. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope
it's
you're
possible
wrong,
they had
too.
to do this because if he's saying drop dead about important documents that they think would put America in danger for one way or another, I think you have to go in there and get the documents. I hope that's not what it's about, because I would love to see him. I mean, I've been fantasizing about it for years, Jim.
By the way, even if he's charged in this, if Gertner's right and she believes, and I unfortunately agree with her, that this notion that he might be barred from office is probably a fairly weak, thin reed. So he's the next president of the United States from cell block C? Is that, I mean, that is the potential. Let's take some calls. 877-301-8970. Where would you like us to go back in Brighton, please? You want to give us a little guidance, please? Diane in Fairhaven, welcome to the show. Diane, always good to talk to you. What's up?
Thank you so much. Nice to talk to you guys, too.
Great.
I am of the opinion that I hope they find something in those documents that shows his major failure handling the COVID crisis. As far as I'm concerned, he's the mass murderer of 500,000 people, and I don't know what could be in there regarding that, and if anything can be pressed as far as charges, but I would love that if it happened.
Diane, thank you very much for the call. That's another one, by the way. I don't know if I do, well, maybe I wouldn't use those exact words, but I share Diane's belief that Donald Trump is responsible for the death of tens of thousands of people because of his initial responses to COVID.
And once
that
again,
is like ancient history.
Well, it is sort of ancient history, and there's also the theory about the former president loves to be in the center of the news. There's been talk lately that his bases that have been behind him, like Fox News, are turning a little bit away from him, moving toward Ron DeSantis. That Fox News covered Pence's speech and didn't cover Donald Trump's speech. And the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who also owns Fox News, has studies of disgrace in recent days for the January 6th stuff. So all these things are there, but you don't know. I just don't know if this is going to pan out the way a lot of us are hoping it will. Steve from Taunton, thank you for calling.
Hello, Steve.
How you doing?
Good.
Hi, thank you.
Pissed off.
Why is that?
Good. I am pissed off, and not for the reasons you think. By doing this, by the FBI entering his home, he's given Trump was falling behind in fundraising. He was losing his step. His mojo was gone, and I was hoping that he'd be out of the picture. Now, I appreciated what he did. I liked some of his policies, but I wanted a DeSantis to win, or at least make open the chances of other people running. Mm-hmm. Now what they've done is they've given him a and Trump knows how to do this. He's going to take this thing. He's going to be the nominee, and who knows? He might be the president, all because of a misstep. The Democrats always shoot themselves in the ass. And they do it again this time.
Steve, we really appreciate your call. I tend to agree with that analysis, even though I think if laws were broken, they had no choice here. This will give fuel to Donald Trump.
Wasn't that my analysis that you said that you were disparaging?
But Steve said it really beautifully. I mean, and Steve, by the way, as he said, he wants a DeSantis or whatever. But this is exactly the persecuted Donald Trump. What's his line? The worst fraud, not worst fraud, worst witch hunt in the history of the country. Well, this is the latest worst witch hunt. And Steve and Marjorie, I think, are onto something. The
deep state overreacting. This is an overreach of the government, blah, blah, blah. Yeah,
you know what the problem is also? The only one who gets to characterize this, and this again gets back to the PR brilliance of Trump, is Trump puts out the release, as I said to Nancy Gertner. That's the only reason we knew about it yesterday. He gets to characterize this thing, but because the Justice Department is under certain rules, they can't have a press conference today and say, well, actually, here's what happened, and here's why we sought the search warrant. So the field is left totally open to Trump to fill in all the spaces,
Yeah, I think they should leak something so that they can they can get ahead of the game. I do like the Nancy Gertner Al Capone tax evasion thing, though. There could be something that they found there that will really solidify the case.
Well, let me quote you yet again, since I didn't quote you last time, and you were obviously perturbed. You said early on in the Trump presidency that it was totally clear that he was violating the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution.
And no one cared about that.
And by the way, there was no dispute there about foreign leaders staying in the hotels, his hotels.
Well,
there is zero dispute. There's zero factual dispute that he was violating the Constitution.
Yeah, nothing happened. And remember, why did they say lock her up endlessly about Hillary Clinton when she was running for president? What was that about?
This.
Classified information.
Yeah.
Her separate server
That's
that they were
point.
upset about, the email. So the rules just seem to not apply to him, but I'm ready to be proved wrong. I'd be thrilled to be proved wrong. Jackie from Haverhill, thank you for calling.
Hello, Jackie.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
So happy to get through. Love you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chuck Todd was on a few weeks ago or a couple of weeks ago and talked about, just in passing, special counsel. I want to know, I've been thinking for a long time, why isn't there a special counsel to avoid to avoid as much as possible.
The notion that it's about
political.
politics. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would love to ask Judge Gertner the next time she's on.
Well, can I tell you something? I think you make a good
question.
point. I don't remember Chuck saying it, but I'm sure you're right. It is a very good question because, by the way, a lot of people think, Jackie, that one of the ways that Merrick Garland has convinced himself that he will be above political reproach as much as one can be is that the walls are closing around Hunter Biden and that the feeling is some action by the Justice Department may be taken around Joe Biden's kid, which would show that he doesn't have, partisan leanings. But I think your point is an excellent one, and I promise we'll ask Judge Gertner that question next time she joins us. Thanks for the
Here's
call.
a question someone asked on YouTube. I think it's Sharon.
Sharoni or something.
Sharoni.
Yeah.
Does anyone think that the impounding of Alex Jones' texts and emails just a few days ago has anything to do with this? And one of the reasons I think people are speculating about that is because of his involvement in the January 6th insurrection.
Yeah.
Remember, just a few days ago, we learned that Alex Jones' lawyers inadvertently dumped 2 years of his texts and emails from his phone to the other side, and his lawyers did not object, so now they are in possession of the January 6th committee. I mean, that's sort of an interesting theory, isn't it?
By the way, totally. Gertner is back on the show on Friday. I mentioned this, so we'll ask the question that was asked a minute ago about special counsel. I've told you a million times, and people should Google this and search this, that when you mention Alex Jones, made me think of it, that I saw a year or so ago a video of a Trump deposition in a civil case before he was president, where the lawyer for the other side asked him, did you ever sign so-and-so? Did you ever do? No. Is this your signature on this document? Yes. Meaning he did a 180 in 30 seconds without blinking an eye. It's like Alex Jones with those texts. By the way, Alex Jones's contention was, forget that he never mentioned Sandy Hook in the text, that he never emailed. His lawyers turned over all these emails, doesn't blink an eye, says, see, I turned him over to you.
Exactly. You see what Rodgers is reporting today?
No.
That Alex Jones sent a naked picture of his wife to Roger Stone.
That's not true. For what purpose?
I don't know. 877.
Is that true, or is that?
Well, it was the Drudge Report. They're usually pretty accurate. I'm not sure what purpose. And Alex thought she looked pretty good in the picture, and he
wanted to see what Roger thought.
I guess so. I don't really know. I just read briefly. I read the headline and a little bit of the story. Let's go to Nick in Rhode Island. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Jim Marjorie.
Good.
Love your show.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a kind of thought that, maybe Trump is, he called the FBI on himself, and how fast he came in with the response that said that they came, so that he loves being persecuted. He thinks he's the most persecuted person in the universe.
Yeah.
And this is just one way to further that. And, he can hide all the documents that he knew would get him in trouble, and then people can come in and see if they're there.
Well, your opinion is not very different from Steve from Taunton, that this works to Trump's advantage. You actually think he may have had some hand in it. I don't know about that. And, Nick, thank you for the call. You know what you ask yourself?
What?
Is even though I assume that if you're Donald Trump or his lawyers, you think it's unlikely there's going to be a search warrant to go into his residence. And by the way, that is his primary residence now. He switched it to Florida, Mar-a-Lago, as opposed to
tax laws
New York.
much better down there.
Don't you think the lawyers say when they're fighting so hard to get those 15 boxes back and you finally do it, and if you didn't turn some things over, think they just leave them in files or lying around or in the safe at Mar-a-Lago? I mean, that's pretty Pretty
That's the other
stupid
thing.
behavior.
The former president says that they cracked open a safe. You wonder
Yeah.
how that happened. You know, it's like on TV, on movies where
Well,
they have
they
the
put their
guy,
ear to the thing and
little
waiting for the
balls
tumblers?
moving around, the tumblers in there, or they blow it up, or was it a little explosion, or what? Benjamin Brighton points out, and this is a good point too, that right-wing Twitter is just spotting off all these dangerous and violent rhetoric. Follow this FBI search. DeSantis talking about the Biden regime. NRA posting some Second Amendment rhetoric. Lots of Civil War talk on Trump's forums. And they were reporting that last night, that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were getting in dangerous territory over this attack.
Well, this is a variation of what Nick and Steve Arcola said, that it plays totally into the hands of the creative public relations genius Donald Trump.
Okay, we are moving on.
By the way, we're going to talk to John about this later.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
John
John King from CNN. We'll get the latest. We'll talk about it with you guys again toward the end of the show. But
Great.
right now, we're switching gears, talking to NBC Sports Authority. Brittney Griner is here at the Boston Public Library, talking about the latest Tom Brady scandal and the retirement of Serena Williams. Plus, Aaron Rodgers loving himself more after going on some psychedelic drug journey. We're going to hear all about that next on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting from the Boston Public Library.
Next time on The World, the presidential election in Kenya. Voters there have practical concerns like the skyrocketing cost of living, also the basic qualifications of the candidates.
Who are we electing? Are we doing a background check on these guys?
The contest has turned into a national discussion about Kenya's haves and have-nots. Our correspondent in Nairobi explains what's at stake and what Kenya's voters want. It's on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and Narrows Center for the Arts on the waterfront in Fall River, featuring Amy Helm on Friday, August 12th at 8. Dedicated to music that matters, art that inspires, and commitment to community. narrowscenter.org. And Discovery Museum in Acton, celebrating 40 years of inspiring learning through hands-on science, nature, and play. Presenting the film Hidden Figures on their lawn Thursday the 11th at 7. The event is open to the public. discoveryacton.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and who are we? Marjorie Egan. We're now joined by Trent. I just forgot for a second who we were and where we were. It's a long day. It's already 11:30. We're now joined by Brittney Griner. I know who she is. She's an anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston, BPR contributor. Hello, Brittney.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, so big breaking news today. Serena Williams is going to retire from tennis.
Well, she's not using the term retirement. It's evolution.
Oh, evolution.
It's
Sorry.
the evolution of her career. It actually was a very poignant, I'm full disclosure, I mostly read the entire Vogue essay she wrote, but it was kind of long, so there were parts where I just skimmed over it because I apparently am a closet millennial who can't read an entire thing. But she basically actually was very open and honest about the struggles of trying to be a mother while playing tennis, and it sounds like, based on the essay she wrote, that she would like to have another child. She'll be 41 in September, shortly after the U.S. Open. She said her daughter Olympia, who is 5, that they were driving in the car not too long ago, and she overheard, like, Olympia was doing something on, like, on the iPad, like all kids do now, like a learning thing, and they asked, like, what she wanted to be when she grew up, and she said, I want to be a big sister. And apparently this is something she says to Serena all the time. She wants to be a big sister. She wants a sister of her own. Apparently she does not want a brother. She only wants a sister. And Serena very openly talked about the challenges of being a female athlete and being pregnant. It's not like listen, the caretaking aside, she talks about just like the women bear the physical burden of having a child. You actually carry the child. So, like, if Novak Djokovic's wife decides to get pregnant again, it's not like a month before she gives birth, Djokovic can't go out and play a tournament, right? He can go out and play. He's not, out to here and pregnant and maybe on bed rest. Like,
she had a difficult time.
She had a very difficult delivery. She said she actually loved being pregnant. And she said, her and her husband, Alexis, have talked about expanding their family. And she also says she has Serena Ventures, which is a venture capitalist firm, which backs, she's starting to get more into other things. But she did say what I thought was interesting is she said, unlike Ashley Barty, who walked away at number 1 in the world, Caroline Wozniacki, who she's very close to, was very much at peace and wanted to leave tennis in 2020. She's like, I'm not, like, I'm really torn. She said when she picks up a racket, she still gets such a rush and she feels like she's still, if she practices and is healthy, can be at the top of her game. She feels like she can pass Margaret Court. But that when, you look at things, there is a finite amount of time for a woman to have children. And she's, let's be frank, she's getting up there in age.
Yeah.
At 41 years old, it becomes increasingly difficult.
She never used the word retirement, not, as you said, not unlike another guy we're going to talk about in a minute ago, Tom Brady. Did she play in the Olympics when you were doing the Olympics?
She did in Rio. She did not in Tokyo.
I mean, I've only seen her on television, and I actually watch a lot of women's tennis since the days of Billie Jean King and obviously Evert and Navratilova. She's so far and away one of the greatest athletes I've ever seen in my life, not to mention the best tennis player I ever saw in my life.
It's unbelievable to watch her play. Her power and just her demeanor on the court. Like, she is such a competitor. And I guess I didn't know this because I did not see King Richard. I heard it was fantastic.
It's really good.
I just haven't had a chance to see it yet. She said, if you watched King Richard, you know what a competitor I was and how she was actually not very good at tennis as a child, that she was always in Venus's shadow.
Yeah.
And that Venus really pushed her, that she had to work much harder, that it came very naturally to Venus. And Serena had to develop this fighter's mentality, which you can always see on the court. Like, I've had the pleasure of seeing her play a couple times in person, and it is stunning. I mean, she is, and Venus. Venus was definitely more towards the end of her career when I saw her at Wimbledon a few years ago, whereas Serena was not quite at her peak, but still like late 30s.
You were at
and
Wimbledon?
I went to Wimbledon in 2018 or
For work
2019.
or for-
No, I just went because after I'd covered tennis at the Olympics, I was telling one of our analysts that I'd never seen a major before, and she goes, "Oh, well, I always get passes to Wimbledon. If you want to go, let me know." And so I took a friend of mine who's a big tennis fan. It was great. We had like these very cool like players passes one day.
Neat.
So we got to go eat lunch. Like, we were walking to lunch, and there was Roger Federer, and I thought my friend who loves Roger, I thought she was gonna fall over. She's like, "That's Roger." I was like, "You can't say that's Roger Federer. We're supposed to be cool, like, tennis guests here." But it was awesome.
great.
It's honestly, if you have a chance to go, we went over like 4th of July. It's like the first sort of weekend of, so it was early on, like all the side courts are going, and you get dressed up, and you wear hats and dresses, and we drank champagne and ate strawberries and cream and stuff. It's awesome. London's great.
So, maybe the biggest non-story story that I can think about, Tom Brady. We mentioned.
What are you talking about?
Is it a non-story?
It is. Who's talking about this? So, Tom, tell the story, by the way.
Yeah.
First of all, for people who've missed it, and I would bet that most people, let's look at the audience here. How many people know what Tom Brady did with the Miami Dolphins his final year for the Patriots? Raise your hand. Maybe 6 people out of the whole audience?
I'm about to tell you, and you might not like Tom Brady so much anymore.
That's right.
So the Dolphins, this all came to light because Stephen Ross, who is the owner of the Dolphins, has been punished along with his, and I forget his business partners. It's something Beal, because it's related Beal. It's like their real estate property. Stephen Ross has been punished. He is suspended from the NFL until October 17th. He's been fined $1.5 million. The Dolphins have been docked first-round picks, I think, in 2023 and 2024 for tampering. You are not supposed to lure players or coaches who are under contract to your team. So remember when Tom Brady was kind of like surly and a pain in our butts, pouting all over the place his last season here. What was his last season? Was it 2019? Right, yes, because COVID, he actually signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right before everything got shut down for COVID. So 2019, his final season. Well, it turns out the entire 2019 season, basically, he was being courted by the Dolphins, but also he was trying to convince the Dolphins to sign him in the offseason because he wanted to go play for Miami. He wanted to go to the rivalry of the New England Patriots, and he spent the entire season trying to convince the ownership of the Dolphins to bring him along. They also got punished because they were also trying to recruit Sean Payton, to be their head coach to leave the New Orleans Saints. Peyton has since retired from football. We'll see how long, and he's in the broadcast booth like most guys do now. And of course, Tom Brady now has been sort of now, and not only did he do it, by the way, I should note, it's not only that he did it to the Patriots, but the whole reason he retired from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is because Brady thought that he was going to be able to go to the Dolphins this offseason, that he would go in as a partial owner, and then they would also make him the quarterback of their team. But then all that stuff happened where Brian Flores sued them for discrimination, and so Brady backed off and didn't want to be involved in it. But it would not surprise me, guys. Tom Brady's contract to the Buccaneers is over this year. If he is still playing at a high level and he wants to go beyond that 45 that he set, it wouldn't surprise me if Tom Brady is the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins next year.
So let's hear Marjorie defend Tom Brady.
Well, I'm not going to defend Tom Brady.
Oh.
I am taking a line, or several lines actually.
You're drawing a line in the sand?
From the great Dan Shaughnessy, Boston Globe columnist, who, as you point out, there were all these penalties for the owners and the other people. Tom Brady gets nothing. Here's what Shaughnessy says. You have to be a true sycophant fanboy to dismiss this one. While he was pouting and performing not as well as we wanted him to in 2019, he was scheming, as Brady says, as Shaughnessy says. And one last thing. Here's Shaughnessy. A lot of New England Patriots fans are still angry at Bill the Tuna Parcells for talking to the Jets while he was taking the Patriots to a Super Bowl. The Tuna had a much better reason for leaving. Apparently he was stabbed in the back by Bob Kraft. He's a much better reason than Brady. So how is the Tuna a traitor, but Tom is not?
So people who will defend Brady will say that the relationship had soured to the point in this relationship that he felt like he had no other choice. He knew he wasn't going to stay with the Patriots. Him and Bill Belichick weren't getting along. They weren't giving him the weapons, that it wasn't that Brady wasn't good in 2019. It was that the people around him were not good enough. So that's what these sycophant fans will tell you, or media members who will stand up for Tom Brady. Like, to me, it just harkens, and I know I often draw from my own personal experiences, which are rooted in the Green Bay Packers, but it reminds me of Brett Favre. It reminds me of when Brett Favre didn't go behind the Packers' backs to leave and go to the Vikings, but first I think he went to the Jets. And then he went to the Vikings. Like, it was awful. Like, when your quarterback that you grew up loving and when you was, and that was only a single Super Bowl. It certainly wasn't 6 of them. When he goes to one of your fiercest rivals in the division, it's like a gut punch seeing him. And then you just root against him and hope that they never play again.
90% of the fans here don't give a damn. And I'll quote Shaughnessy where you didn't. Beyond weak, phony, a betrayal, hard to forgive.
Exactly.
I mean, if any other player did this while he's being paid by your team, he's talking to another team while he's under contract about going there, people will be apoplectic. Of course. Except it's Tom Brady.
But it's Dan Shaughnessy did not have the 20 by 20 foot picture of Tom Brady's face
that
staring
you have
at
right
him
across.
for 2 years.
Is his face up there?
No. But while they were
Used to
building
be.
the Tom Brady terrific store over there that's right across the street from us here in the Boston Public Library, this huge picture. And you know what? He was looking at me for 3 hours every Tuesday and every Friday.
But he's no Aaron Rodgers in a tight white tank top.
Well,
I heard you. I almost called in last week when you guys were talking about it. Because I was driving into work listening to you. I was like, "Geez, Marjorie."
Well, pretty hot video.
He did look pretty good in the tight white tank top. He must say. Why don't we?
He's not a bad-looking guy.
He is not a bad-looking guy. No, he had kind of everybody said he looked like
Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage was. He was
a
Con Man.
Con Air.
Con Air.
He had sort of a Jesus Christ hairdo with the hair swept back, putting his
Play a
hands
little
through his
sound
hair.
from Aaron Rodgers.
Let's play a little. Yeah, here's Aaron Rodgers
trip.
on the Aubrey Marcus podcast last week talking about his 2020 trip to Peru, where he apparently tried a bunch. What do you call this drug?
I have no idea.
It's like psychedelic.
It's a psychedelic. It's like something that you do, and apparently, but we'll play the sound and then I'll explain.
It gave me a deep and meaningful appreciation for life, and my intention the first night going in was I want to feel what pure love feels like, and I did. I had a magical experience with the sensation of feeling 100 different hands on my body, imparting a blessing of love and forgiveness for myself and gratitude
I can't
for
believe this guy's
this
my
life
quarterback.
from what seemed to be my ancestors.
By the way, those are the exact same words that Marjorie
there's a guy
said.
doubled over laughing, and
No.
you should be. It's insanity.
Hold it. That's exactly what you said your junior year at Stanford. Do
That's
you
what
remember
I
that?
said. That's what I said.
Exactly. That was
like
exactly.
psychedelic drug is
hands
nothing.
all
100
over me,
hands.
pulling out the
Pure
love.
love.
I mean, listen, I say this about Kyrie Irving, and I also say it about Aaron Rodgers, and I like Aaron Rodgers more because he is listen, if this psychedelic
He was
drug...
a great host of Jeopardy,
He
too.
was, and if this
great.
psychedelic drug means that the Packers win a Super Bowl this year,
You're
take
okay
them.
with
I
that?
don't care. Take them all you want. Whatever you want to do.
Are they allowed to take
Well,
drugs?
they're not on the banned substance list. But Peter King wrote at length about this in his whatever
Monday
his Monday
morning
morning quarterback. It's
yeah.
not called that anymore, but
Oh, it
whatever it's
isn't?
called.
Okay,
It's whatever
yeah.
his column is called. For NBC Sports, he did write that right now he's not going to test positive for any banned substances because it's not a banned substance, but this might be something that the NFL has to look into. But there's also the possibility, guys, that they sort of, if there isn't any harmful effects or there isn't any performance enhancing effects other than making you feel all of the
Pure love.
and pure love.
Well,
And 100 different hands on his body.
Right, and just like
That was Deshaun Watson,
and hey,
actually.
I was
Said
just
that.
going to say, at least it wasn't literally 100 different hands on his body like Deshaun Watson. So, I mean, pick your poison.
Sorry, you're too late.
But I think, they might look at it like marijuana. They do not regulate marijuana anymore the same way they used to because a lot of guys use it for pain tolerance and just, and pain relief, anxiety relief and whatnot. Listen, I look at Aaron Rodgers and I actually feel a little sad for him because I think he's someone who has never quite found in football what he was hoping to. I think he hasn't ever quite found in life what he's looking to find. And I think that he's constantly searching for peace and happiness, similar to Kyrie Irving. There are times when I look at Kyrie Irving and I actually feel a little bad for him because it's like no amount of money or success or titles and fame brings them what they so desperately are like searching and looking for. And I don't know that they'll ever find it, but like I said, I mean, I'm selfish. So if this wins the Packers another Super Bowl, apparently Peter King did write in his column that he noticed a change in Aaron Rodgers, that he was like more forgiving
Well, he knows
and
what
helpful.
pure love feels like.
Yeah, like
obviously.
helpful with his teammates because he can be extremely demanding of his teammates. He can be aloof at times. I mean, quite frankly, he can pass the blame on them and say and be very blunt in his assessment of what the team's doing. And according to Peter King, who spent a couple days at camp, there was a noticeable difference in his demeanor at camp.
By the way, when you were working at that ashram, when you were at Stanford,
Did you work at an
Did you feel
ashram?
pure love?
I didn't work at one.
Well, yes,
I went
you
to one.
did.
I went to one for a
Yes, you
weekend
did.
for my class called Sleep and Dreams.
Ooh, I took a dream class.
What was your major? Some ridiculous thing. What was it called?
It was American Studies.
Civilization.
No, American Studies. It was a great major.
That's like geography
American English,
in college.
American painting, American history, American all that. Yeah, it was an American
What does that
immersion.
prepare you for exactly?
Being on talk radio all these years later. That's what prepared me for it. So there you go.
What does a broadcasting degree prepare you for?
You have a broadcasting
Nothing.
degree?
Yeah, I have a broadcast. It's broadcast and electronic communications is my degree.
Wow.
But
Wow.
now they call it, I went back to Marquette when I was home for my bachelorette party. Now they call it digital media. It's digital
Fine.
journalism. You have to do a little bit of
Speaking of drugs, we all know the story of Brittney Griner.
Yeah.
Here is Bill Richardson, former governor of New Mexico, who's been involved in a lot of these hostage deals or prisoner trades. Here he is with George Stephanopoulos sharing his optimism about the possibility of Griner being part of a swap.
And my view is that I'm optimistic. I think she's going to be freed. I think she has the right strategy of contrition, a good legal team. There's going to be a prisoner swap, though, and I think it'll be 2 for 2 involving Paul Whelan. We can't forget him.
You know, we're going to talk to Sean Ellis and Victor Rosario later, both of whom spent decades in prison for crimes they did not commit. So I'm not equating in terms of the intensive, well, maybe I am. This woman, released or not, she's never going to be the same.
No.
When you see her face, when you see the grotesque unfairness, the injustices, the whatever, the sentencing, what is it, 9.5 years
for
this
cannabis
thing.
oil.
It is really so painful. It's incredible. It's really horrible.
I will say this too, though. I mean, let's not, and like, Bill Richardson says, it's like she should be released, and there should be a 2 for 2 prisoner swap because Paul Whelan doesn't belong there either, and Paul Whelan has gone through hell and back.
Well,
for
there's actually a
something that he
third guy
did,
there,
and there's
by
a
the way,
third
a
guy that
United
everyone has
States
sort of like forgotten
Yes.
about. And
Who's
that's
also got a minor drug thing, not unlike hers.
And that's the thing. Like, this case has gotten a ton of attention because she plays in the WNBA, and she's an athlete, and we pay an abnormal amount of attention to celebrities, whether they're, athletes or actors or whatever they are. But there are other people there right now who have been there even longer than Brittney Griner. So for me, we have to, and this is going to sound probably a little unfair, but we have to treat everybody sort of equally. So if she is going to be able to come home, then I think Paul Whelan should be able to come home. And this other guy should, I don't know what the status is. I think the other person has not quite been there as long as either of them, or...
I don't know about that, but regardless, I mean, his quote, crime is not dissimilar from hers.
I did find it interesting
that
that Richardson said he did not like that the Biden administration was so public about it so early on in the process, that he felt that actually hurt her chances and Whelan's chances of coming home earlier, that as a negotiator, that the early tactic they took of not having too much attention brought to the case was actually the better strategy.
One last thing about that. There are a lot of different people have a lot of different views about what works and what doesn't. Jason Rezaian, who spent 500 days in an Iranian prison, was on TV with me a couple of months ago about this Griner thing, and he was critical because most of the people close to Griner were trying to be quiet about this, and he said it's the exact opposite, at least in his opinion, of what not only Griner needs to hear, but the effort needs. Before you go, the Red Sox obviously have had a bad stretch, and I am still hopeful, and I'm particularly hopeful because I feel when Chris Sale comes back, things are going to totally... Now, he did break his finger. We all saw the video of the ball hitting his finger. When will he be back?
Well, he's not coming back, Jim, because he fell off his bike over the weekend and broke his right wrist. Breaking news, everyone.
How is that even possible?
Is this guy made of, porcelain?
Well, he is a thin little guy.
I know he's thin, but, give that guy a glass of whole milk every day. What is going on? Listen, injuries happen, right? The comebacker to the mound, and that you can't stop that. That's a bang bang play that he tried to make. He tried to do something good for the team, but now you have a broken finger and you're home, in I don't know, Florida, wherever the heck you are, and you're out tooling around on a bike. If you can't ride a bike, don't ride it because you get hurt doing everything.
Do they have any rules about what you can do during the season
Oh
athletically?
yeah, some of the individual contracts.
I wondered if bike riding, I guess it's allowed?
I don't know. That's actually an interesting question, because maybe there's a way that they can void this terrible, terrible contract that they gave to Chris Sale. He has now had Tommy John. He has had a broken rib. He has had COVID twice. He broke his finger, and now he has broken his wrist.
Has he been vaccinated?
Oh, no.
No, not yet.
No.
I thought maybe he changed his
He's
mind.
been out essentially for 4 years. I tried to take Friday off. Marjorie wouldn't let me. So it's a whole different industry kind of thing.
That's right. I feel nervous at the library without you, Jim.
Nice to see you there.
Thank you very much.
See you guys next week.
Yes,
NBC
you will.
sports reporter and anchor Tredi Kuznarek, thank you very much for being with us. As always, right after the noon news, we're going to talk with GBH News investigative reporter Chris Burrell on how Massachusetts beaches aren't inaccessible to many. And things are getting tense on the shore, especially in this heat wave. He's next on 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Comcast. Xfinity Internet is committed to bringing speeds over a gig to power your devices while fitting your needs and a range of budgets. Learn more at xfinity.com/gig. An undercover investigation into the Taliban's crackdown on women in Afghanistan reveals the harsh realities of life for women there. Don't miss Frontline, Afghanistan Undercover, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
I'm nighttime news anchor Mary Blake, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, threats to call the police, physical fights, angry homeowners. These are just a few of the things beachgoers in Massachusetts face when trying to access the state's coastline, according to GBH's Facebook. After Chris, we'll open the line to hear your trials and travails in beachgoing. Then if pandemic toilet paper, dog food, and sriracha shortages weren't enough, how about a carbon dioxide shortage? Food writer Corby Cummer explains how this could affect your IPAs and lagers.
After serving decades in prison for crimes they did not commit, Sean Ellis and Victor Rosario join us to detail what the government, which wrongly imprisoned them, does for them when they get out. Basically, nothing. Then we'll hear from CNN's John King and the latest ramifications of the FBI's Mar-a-Lago search. All that and more ahead. Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Republicans are blasting the FBI's raid of former President Donald Trump's residence in Florida. NPR's Windsor Johnson reports the agency executed a search warrant last night, apparently as part of an investigation by the Justice Department to determine whether Trump improperly removed classified presidential records from the White House when he left office.
House Republicans are reverting back to a familiar playbook, echoing former President Donald Trump's claims of a political witch hunt against him. In a statement on Twitter, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy claimed the Justice Department has reached an intolerable state of weaponized politicization. He also warned Attorney General Merrick Garland of an investigation into the department if the GOP retakes the House in November. Other Republicans are calling to defund the FBI in response to the search. On the Senate side, Texas Republican Ted Cruz called the raid unprecedented, while others are demanding that the FBI explain what they were doing and why. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
President Biden's presenting what he describes as a once-in-a-generation investment in America, grants and tax credits for semiconductor manufacturing and scientific research. A short time ago, Biden signed the CHIPS bill into law. He says the legislation's in the U.S.'s economic and national security interests.
We need these semiconductors not only for those Javelin missiles, but also for weapon systems of the future that are going to be even more reliant on advanced chips. Unfortunately, we produce 0% of these advanced chips now. And China is trying to move away ahead of us and manufacture these sophisticated chips as well. It's no wonder the Chinese Communist Party actively lobbied U.S. business against this bill.
Throughout his speech, the 79-year-old was struggling with a cough. His doctor has said that Biden recovered from COVID-19 and has tested negative multiple times for the coronavirus. Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy is about to retire after nearly 50 years in Congress. It's shaken up the state's three-person congressional delegation. Michaela Lafrac of Vermont Public Radio reports today's Democratic primary elections for both House and Senate could be the beginning of big changes for the state.
For more than a decade, Vermont has sent the same three men to Congress, Senators Patrick Leahy and Bernie Sanders and Congressman Peter Welch. But now Welch is running for Senate, so Vermont's sole seat in the House is opening up. The two frontrunners in the Democratic primary are both women, Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray and State Senate Pro Tem Becca Balint. Vermont is the only state that still has yet to elect a woman to Congress. So if Gray or Balint wins the seat in the fall, she'll be the first. Vermont is a majority blue state, so the winner of this Democratic primary will be the frontrunner to win in November. For NPR News, I'm Michaela Lafrac in Burlington.
This is NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell with the local stories we're following. Residents of a city-run housing facility in Everett say extreme heat has turned life in the building into a nightmare. Residents of Glendale Towers, a 50-year-old affordable housing complex, say temperatures have been getting up to 100 degrees during the day and over 90 degrees at night. Elliot Vasquez lives there, and he spoke before a regular city council meeting last night, and he described the conditions.
People cannot sleep at night. They have respiratory issues that are worsening because of the condition. Their lower extremities are swelling. People are going in and out of the hospital with heat exhaustion-related issues.
The Housing Authority tells GBH News they have not received complaints from residents, and they say they don't have the funding to add AC units in the building. ISO New England says power supplies are holding up during this lengthy heat wave, which is forecast to end tomorrow. ISO spokesman Matt Copley tells GBH News usage on the power grid has been high, but he says it's in line with recent years during peak conditions. Copley says the highest peak usage occurred back in August of 2006, and recent usage has not approached that so far. In sports, the Red Sox say Chris Sale is out for the rest of the season after he broke his wrist during a bicycle accident over the weekend. The Sox say Sale underwent successful surgery yesterday. The team says the 33-year-old will be ready for spring training next year. The Red Sox host the Braves this afternoon. Well, the heat advisory is still in effect all day long with a rip current risk for Nantucket. Sun and clouds, highs in the low 90s this afternoon. Stormy weather's possible. Right now it's 93 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Subaru, featuring the 2022 Subaru Forester Wilderness, with 9.2 inches of ground clearance and all-terrain tires for off-road capability. Learn more at Subaru.com/wilderness.
And for more original reporting, visit gbhnews.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we are also streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
And this Friday, Elizabeth Warren will be joining us live at the Boston Public Library to take people's questions. The following Friday, Mayor Wu will join us. Same deal. By the way, before we start, I thought you were being hyperbolic when you mentioned Alex Jones sent nude photos of his wife
He did.
to Roger Stone.
Well, I thought it might have only been one, actually.
Well, Jamie, maybe it was one. Jamie just gave us
There
the
it is.
story. It was part of the text, that dump that the lawyers did by mistake. And you know what is really interesting that the plaintiff's lawyers raised? If it's without the permission of his wife, he may have committed a crime by having transmitted the photo.
It does sound like a wild household down there. Apparently, the wife was hauled out by the cops for domestic violence on Christmas Eve. So who knows what goes on in that household.
In any case, today we learn is the final day of the 3 hottest weeks in the history of Boston. It is likely the last day of the heat wave of the forecasts are right. We might be settling into more comfortable weather. Still, the heat this summer has driven many of us indoors or to places that are cooler, including our beaches, with rising demand for access to the shore, which by some estimates only 12% are open to everyone, whatever that means. There are also increasing tensions between would-be beachgoers and the gatekeepers controlling who gets on the beach and who does not. In a couple of minutes, the phone and text lines will be open. We'd love to hear your stories of beach access. If you've been turned away, what have you had to do to get access to the shore? Which beaches have become your summertime sanctuary? But first, we're joined by Chris Burrell. Chris is an investigative reporter for GBH News. His terrific series, Barriers at the Beach, is available at gbhnews.org. Chris, good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Jim.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Chris.
Thanks,
As I
Marjorie.
said before we went on the air, I commend you for doing all this investigative reporting on the beaches in the summertime. I mean, it's a great place to be doing your investigative work in this heat and these sunny days. But anyway, tell people, what is the deal with the public access to the beaches in Massachusetts? We've talked to you about this before, but tell people again.
Yeah, we have 1,400 miles of coastline in Massachusetts, and a huge portion of it is just privately owned. And in Massachusetts, the laws say you can't even set foot on a privately owned beach unless you have a fishing pole. You're going fishing. You might be navigating a boat, on and off that beach. Or fowling, or something duck hunting apparently. So those are the ways that people are legally allowed to get onto privately owned beaches. The other huge problem is that there's a huge swath of the beaches, the public beaches in the state, that are controlled by towns, the beach communities in the state, and those are largely off limits through all of these really complex and financially, exorbitant in some cases, parking regulations. Right. So went to Marshfield. There's a public beach that the taxpayers foot the bill for this seawall that's pretty much brand new, and you can't park within a mile of this beach. So you could get there if you park more than a mile and trudge all your stuff over to this beach. It's like this up and down the coastline in the beach towns.
Yeah, I don't want you to gloss over, as you just did, taxpayers fund the seawall. I help pay, all three of us help pay for that seawall or other beach restoration in other communities, but that gives me no right to access. I'm helping that one community, and their return for me is go find another beach to go lie down on or swim in, correct?
That's true. And there was an article or an op-ed in yesterday's New York Times around this very issue that across the country that, any of this kind of renourishment of beaches, which happens when they throw a big tube into the ocean and suck out the sand and rebuild these beaches. These are federally supported projects through the Army Corps of Engineers. It's happening all over the country, and a lot of these beaches are, again, off limits to the general public.
And by the way, the thing that is in your most recent story in late July, let me give you the names of a couple of people. This is Boots Tolsdorf. Tell us who Boots is and what happened to her on some beach in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I found Boots through,
That's her real name, by the way.
That is her real name, Boots
yes.
Tolsdorf, yeah. So she's of some wealth. She has a summer home on Nantucket. I found her name in testimony submitted to the State House for this proposed bill that would allow access to the intertidal zones in the state. I reached out to her. We had a great phone conversation, and about this event that happened, this incident that happened last summer. She is 80 years old, so last summer she's 79. She was on a public beach in Nantucket and wanted to get some scallop shells, collect scallop shells for her granddaughter, who's in her 20s, like scallop shells, whatever. And she knew she was crossing the line. This guy had posted on his private beach, can't trespass, but she thought she was staying close to the water, which would be, below the low tide line. There'd be wet sand. And immediately, she alleges this guy came storming down the beach, told her she was breaking the law, she transgressed, she trespassed, and she alleges that he pushed her twice. And she eventually got out of there. I mean, she's tough. She kind of knew she was kind of getting into something, she told me. But the police were called, and they did not charge her with trespassing. She ended up pursuing it to see if they would charge this guy with assaulting an elderly person. Is still playing out. They're seeking the charges down Nantucket District Court.
Well, explain that whole high tide, low tide thing, because that's a big issue.
Yeah, so basically ownership in the state goes all the way down to the low tide line. And I guess this is a bit of a subjective thing, where that is. But it's, the intertidal zone between the low and the high tide line is off limits, is considered private property if it's privately owned beachfront. And so people aren't even allowed to, you'll get in many beaches that are privately owned, just like happened to Boots Tolsdorf, you'll get chased off. And we've heard from so many listeners and readers who tell stories about kayaks pulling up on the beaches and people chasing them off. Or
tell us about the kayak person. That was
Kent
unbelievable
Harrop,
too. The retired minister. Yeah. Brutalized.
Yeah, I considered him. I figured he'd be a pretty mild-mannered guy, a retired minister. He spent most of his career in Oregon, which is notable for being a completely open beaches in that state. Nothing's private. And, he moved back to Massachusetts where he'd grown up. And he loves to kayak. He lives in Beverly. He loves to kayak between the little islands out there. And he said he's an older guy. He's getting cramped up inside the kayak. He said, I'm just going to go over on this beachhead and stretch my legs. He said, very quickly, somebody came out and didn't care that he was maybe a little bit older, that his legs were cramping. I was like, you buzz off this beach or I'm calling the cops.
Okay, I want to know what it's like in Oregon. So if you have a beachfront piece of property, you're right on the water, do people just come down in Oregon and walk from someplace else? I assume there's not a road they can come into. How does it work?
I was in Oregon, 30 years ago. My brother used to live there, and I remember the beaches were just massive. I mean, there's just huge tidal shifting there. Yeah. And I don't remember that there was any problem getting the beaches. My wife's from Northern California. Similarly, when you drive up and down the Pacific Coast Highway, constant little parks. Right. I mean, literally every few miles, it seems like, and you're just right there on the beach. There's, there are issues more in Southern California around access to beaches and largely triggered by the wealth, which is the point I made.
That's what I was wondering about if we change the law in Massachusetts, because there are so many places that are right on the water, and you walk 40 feet from your back door, and there's the ocean, and there's your piece of property if you own it now in Massachusetts. So what would that mean? Would it mean...
Well, explain. There's actually a bill pending with Senator Sear, and what's the state rep's name?
Dylan Fernandez.
Yeah, explain what their bill would do.
Yeah, they're basically saying just add the word recreation to the allowable, legal access to the beaches, which would mean recreation. What we typically see at the beach, people throw down a towel, they chill out, they take some swims, have a soda, whatever, and that would be allowable. That his thinking, the rep from Andes who I interviewed, is that, these are the common uses of beaches today. Back in the colonial era when this law developed, people weren't, hanging out on the beach, relaxing. They were there for industrial or economic purposes.
But does this high tide, low tide come into this bill thinking there's a certain space where you can recreate if this bill passes?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
What is that space?
That's the intertidal zone.
Okay.
So it'd be like this access to this intertidal zone.
Don't hold your breath, either of you, and I'm sure you'd agree with this. You bought a piece of property. I'm not happy about this. You bought a piece of property with an understanding that you own down to the low tide. Correct my language whenever I screw up here, Chris Burrell. Down to the low tide line. All you can do, people can do fouling, fish, or whatever that other verbs are a minute ago. And they pass a bill on Beacon Hill. Governor Baker or the next governor signs it. You immediately sue, saying, that's my private property.
Well,
you're taking away my property without any compensation.
One of the big issues.
We're screwed.
Because, of course, they will say, I bought my house for $5 million.
That's part of the value, right.
Now it's only worth $3 million because we can have Tom, Dick, and Harry coming down there recreating on my beach property.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think you guys are making great points. In fact, Maine is really our example, and where they shot that down. They tried to do exactly, similar thing. Went to the state Supreme Court and they shot it down. And then there's libertarian legal firms just waiting for the chance to jump on this if this were to take place.
So you're our beach guru. You're our only hope, Chris Burrell. And also, assuming we all agree that if this law were to be changed, and we shouldn't hold our breath, because a far more powerful guy than these two, Billy Bulger, as you'll remember, Marjorie, tried doing a similar thing a lot of years. He actually cared a lot about this issue. There was a populist side to Billy Bulger. Most people only know him because of the Bulger family deal. So short of that, if we're right that the legal challenges will probably screw up anything they're able to achieve if they achieve anything on Beacon Hill, what's the solution? What should the next governor do if he or she cares about beach access for people who are not lucky enough to live in a coastal town? What's the solution?
Yeah, I think two things are pretty clear. One is that, if there's public money going to that beach, and I've been told by experts that basically any piece of coastline has public money behind it. It's not like it just exists there and nobody helped contribute to the beach renourishments or some way to support that fragile coastline. And that the parking regulations are this loophole. It's like, okay, the beach is public, but good luck getting here. So I would seem to me that there could be a tougher, tighten up that loophole or get rid of that loophole. That if there's federal or state money going to support this beach, you can't be messing with people's access. The other thing is, this might sound small, but Maine has tried this, and I might go up there and take a look at it before the end of summer, which is looking at historical deeds. And we're going back hundreds of years in this part of the country and finding places that were basically laid out. There were rights of way to the coastline. Maine supports these efforts kind of from a grassroots level for people to kind of start to investigate that and then support it with legal help to identify places that are historically and by law, by deeds, public.
One last thing on this access issue and tax dollars. Maybe I'm missing something. I live in Cambridge. I live in Inman Square. If the city council in Cambridge said, and I'm thinking out loud as I'm speaking, you may only enter Inman Square if you live in Cambridge. And Marjorie from Brookline, if you attempt to go to Inman Square, I'm sorry, there's no room for you there. Perfectly analogous to me, to one of these coastal towns, we wouldn't be allowed to do that. So why is a beach town allowed to say, I can't go on their beach when I can't say to them, you can't come to Inman Square?
Well, this is my next story is looking at, what does underlie those decisions. And this guy studied Connecticut, this guy from UVA historian, and found, well, not surprisingly, there's some racism there. Of course, it's not going to be overt. It's like we don't want, black, brown, Asian people coming into our town and coming on our beaches. No, I don't just mean the motivation.
I understand the motivation is I want my locals who vote for me to have unlimited access and not Jim or Marjorie or Chris. I'm just saying, what's the basis? If I can't exclude you from a portion of my community. Why can they exclude me from a portion of their community?
I get it. I think it comes down to like parking. I mean, obviously, there's many parts of your town, your city. I can't park on these streets. You're right, but
need a permit.
But largely,
that's a good point.
Largely speaking, you make a really good point. There's some incongruity there between.
I think you're just being nice to me, but go ahead. It's
how
okay.
we
I appreciate
experience, public places or cities and towns. I think the point that was made that I came up with when I got into this story idea is that it's this beautiful part of our state. It is like this epic resource, and the fact that the access to it is so uneven and has been a lot of complacency. That's just how it is in Massachusetts. Is why I wanted to do this story.
Because we're outliers. You pointed out the story.
Are we outliers? Are we outliers, or
I
most
think so.
states are?
Yeah, I think here's how it goes. My sense, and I've interviewed these coastal experts who look at this issue nationally, is that there's parts of the Great Lakes, there's all these coastal states where the higher the real estate values go, even in Florida, where you're supposed to be able to get on these beaches, the more people are like, we don't want you over here.
Well, that's what I wondered about. You talk about how a lot of urban beaches are open to the public and ritzy neighborhood beaches are not. But I'm trying to think, is there an urban beach that has these expensive houses right there? I don't know of any. I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
I think South Boston.
There are a lot of nice houses in South Boston across the street from the beaches.
But they're across the street from the beach. So South Boston is an open beach. You can go anywhere over there. But I'm trying to think if there are places where there are, like it is on parts of the Cape, where the house is there and 40 feet away is the water. I don't know places like that.
Yeah.
Or New York City, maybe Staten Island or Queens or something. I don't know.
Right.
Chris, let me just tell you something. We praise your reporting all the time. The more I think about it, it's not enough. You have to solve, you don't just have to report on this, you have to solve this problem. And I have to say, don't you think the vast majority of people in Massachusetts want there to be a solution to this problem?
Yeah, again, you just want to go and enjoy this part of why you live in Massachusetts and put up with the traffic or the taxes and the cost. That's like, just some time on the beach seems like a pretty basic thing to experience. And it's nature. It should be shared by everybody.
Can you tell Boots we say hello next time you talk to her?
Yes,
before you go, Susan from Pembroke raises a great point. She says expanding beach access would have severe negative impacts for those who live not on the shore but near the shore. Traffic is horrible already. If you live in the South Shore, you can't leave, have family parties, or anything else on the weekends because all the beach-bound traffic, even with limited beach access, is overwhelming. And that is a good point. I have been stuck in terrible traffic down there before.
I mean, I live in Newburyport, where traffic is bad, on the weekends, and you learn to deal with it. One of the arguments that's been made to me is that because it's a bottleneck situation, we've got these certain beaches that are open to large members of the public, and so like Gloucester, right? That town just gets overwhelmed, or Ipswich, where Crane Beach is, right? It's trustees owned, but they get a lot of traffic.
Hey, before you go, Paul from Norton raises an issue that I'm embarrassed I didn't think about, since I think I'm the only. You're not a lawyer, are you? I'm sort of a lawyer, but not much of one. Why can't the state take this low to high tide space by eminent domain?
They could, but eminent domain isn't free. You have to pay for it. You have to pay for it, and there were. I mean, that's where many of the public beaches in the state there is a track record of eminent domain.
Really?
The beach I was on Martha's Vineyard, South Beach, very popular beach that's shrinking because of climate change. Was an eminent domain taking to the tune of $3 or $4 million back in the late 80s.
Does GBH actually pay you for this? I mean, you're Martha's Vineyard
exactly.
last
Nantucket,
week.
hanging out up in Cranes Beach. He's having a great time.
This is pathetic.
But there's the other thing that we are. I thought we were the outlier, one of the outliers, because of our low water mark. Like Rhode Island has a high water mark, right? High tide thing. So you have that space to walk between where the water is at high tide and where we are at low tide. That's what makes us different, I think.
That's true.
Okay,
yeah, we're among just a handful of states. Maine is basically identical, given the colonial overlap between the two states.
Chris, fabulous. In all seriousness, fabulous and really important reporting. It's great to see you.
Great to see you guys
again
too.
Next to round.
Chris Burrell is an investigative reporter for GBH News. His series Barriers to the Beach is available on gbhnews.org. And again, we commend him for doing his investigation in July and August. It's the only time it should really be done. Okay, we're going to open up the lines to you at 877-301-8970. See what you think about this. We also have a bunch of texters who have weighed in already. Would you like the beaches to be open to everybody, no hose barred in Massachusetts all year long? 877-301-8970. Susan from Milton, you are first. Thanks for calling.
Hi, Susan.
Oh, hi, Jim and Margie. How are you?
Great.
Excellent.
Am I echoing with you?
It's okay.
No,
Go
it's
ahead.
okay. Just keep talking.
It's interesting what the person that said. My father, who's an attorney, who actually knew Billy Belger pretty well, going back to the 60s, my father and I were down the Cape. I think it might have been Dennis. My family was there. And we were walking along the beach, but in the water. And a man came running out of his house. And, of course, my father, being an attorney, knew the law. And promptly began to tell the man that, no, we are not on his property. So they engaged in verbally, but it all worked out and we went on. And I remember being so proud of my father, knowing the statistics and sticking up for me and himself and myself. And I've always been upset about that people can own the whole ocean in front of them.
Well, they can't own
my second part.
Yeah, they can't own the whole ocean. You should have been able to walk in the
Well,
water.
that's not I'm being sarcastic. I mean, I'm being sarcastic, but I did live in Florida and St. Petersburg. I have friends that live in Naples. Now, you can walk anywhere on those beaches. And as much as I'm not happy with Florida right now, you can walk on their beaches from Naples all the way from Loudermill Park to the pier and go past $1 million homes and no one's running out.
Yeah, but of course, as you intimated a minute ago, here's the trade-off. Full access to the beach, but you get Ron DeSantis. Here you can't get on the beach, and you get Charlie Baker. So you got to decide. Susan, thank you much for the call.
Stephen from South Yarmouth says his South Yarmouth beaches have recently been closed to swimming because of Portuguese man-of-war invasion.
Oh, I've heard a lot of that.
And he wants to know, should they be calling immigration services or Homeland Security? What's he going to do
You know what part of the
about the
problem is?
Portuguese men-of-war invading?
We live in a state where we're acclimated to the notion that we can't get beach access, and it really is an outrage. I mean, when you hear her mention, like in Florida, you can just walk anywhere, and in Oregon or whatever Chris was mentioning a minute ago to you, it really is unjust. And I have to say, I'm sure there's a flaw in it, but I haven't figured it out yet. My analogy, which sounds ridiculous on the surface, I don't understand why it is ridiculous. I can't bar an out-of-towner from a part of Cambridge, but they can bar an out-of-towner from a part of their coastal community.
Well, I think you hit on it before. Because people buy their property with the understanding.
No. I'm talking about the public beaches. I'm not talking about individual homes. I'm talking about the beach in a town. Like you go to the Cape, for example, you got to buy a permit. If you're a couple of weeks in Wellfleet or you're any of the places on the Cape, you got to buy a permit. And if you either can't afford a permit or they're full up, you're screwed. But we can't do the same thing in our community.
It's kind of like the pot stores, Jim.
What is that?
Raking in all that money for making the pot stores pay all this money to open your pot store there.
Well, that's changing a little bit.
They have an opportunity. It is changing, and it should change. But they have an opportunity to make some money from all these permits, and Wellfleet is probably a big part of their budget, and Truro, and all those places too. You know what I read in Chris's report, though? I was so upset about it. That Nauset Beach had to move its parking lot higher because the ocean is coming in so much, and that's part of the Cape Cod National Seashore, which I think was that John Kennedy? I think he did the Cape Cod National Seashore, and it's disappearing, which is a tragedy.
Neil go ahead.
Marlborough. Hi,
Hey, Neil. Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks. Really appreciate the series. I had a comment on what is recreational use. And just some quick background. So we have a fixer-upper on the Cape. We're about a 15-minute, 12-minute walk to a public beach, and then there's a little pathway to some other areas that are beside the public beach. And what we see is people bringing huge trolleys of stuff, beach chairs, umbrellas, big tents, coolers, and they set up camp in the area that we would describe as, it's way up from the high tide line or the low tide line, because of course that goes out about a third of a mile. But you see these encampments, and then in the water, everybody's got a beer in front of somebody's private property. Now, again, I don't have waterfront property, but it's what is recreational use, and that should be a part of the conversation.
Well, by the way, I totally agree with you. It's obviously the devil is in those details, and they have to divine them, but there's nothing there now. So I would, as a person who has problems getting beach access, I'd take limited definition of recreation, open the door, Neil, and be sensitive to the issues you raise rather than not having
Don't disagree.
Yeah, Neil, thank you very much for the call. Can I ask you a question totally unrelated to this, and I should know, maybe a text? Why does Joe Biden wear aviator sunglasses all the time?
I don't know. Maybe he has red eyes
But
or
you
doesn't.
don't know?
I don't know why. Do you know why?
No, I don't know why, and I see it every single
Looks
day.
good
But
in
he's
them.
just signing the CHIPS bill, and he's the only one with sunglasses. It's just odd. I mean, it's odd.
I mean, he's 79. Maybe his eyes are
Well, I don't know.
hypersensitive
I don't
to the
know.
sun, or maybe I don't know.
Jim Jordan just responded to that. He said he should be impeached because he wears these sunglasses. And I just don't know what. Let's go to Walter in Cambridge. Hey, Walter, welcome to the show. What's up?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
So my wife brought the kids up to New Hampshire a couple weeks ago to go to Hampton Beach, and there was nowhere to park, so she ended up at Seabrook Beach, a mile down the road, whatever. She's handicapped as well, so she has a handicap placard. She got her car towed and ticketed to the tune of about $350. I think that the towns are just as guilty, if not more guilty, than the private residents of not letting people on these beaches. And the gentleman brought up a point: the parking is the loophole, but there's nowhere to park. And they reserve all these spots for quote residents, and the spots are empty.
Well, whether they're empty or not, it's an exclusionary practice, and I can't believe. Do your wife fight that, or did she just pay the $350?
And I'm also wondering, Walter, was it had to be a town resident? Was that the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were signs. I mean, what are you going to do? How do you fight it?
Yeah. Well, I remember.
Go ahead, Walter.
She thought the handicap placard would have protected her because she was 2 spots away from the only handicap spot that was filled, but it didn't.
Hey, horrible story. Walter, thank you for sharing it with us, though. We appreciate it.
I remember doing a story when I was first at the stringer for the Globe a million years ago about public beaches on Cape Cod in really hot weather like this, how you got to get there by like 9:30 in the morning or the parking lots are filled up,
When your kids were little, I had this experience when you got in line early and you didn't get in, were your kids crying in the back seat? I had that kind of deal. It's really a problem.
Yeah, no.
You got to leave like at 7 o'clock in the morning now.
And
even though some have reservation systems, I think, which I guess.
Well, that's what they did up, I think, in Gloucester and some of the North Shore towns to avoid being overrun by people looking for places to park. And someone texted, I don't know if they're right about this, but this Horseneck Beach in Westport charges $40 to park if you don't have a Massachusetts plate. So you better go there with a Massachusetts plate, but they say it's unaffordable for Rhode Island. But Rhode Island, I think, is a different law where you do have...
What is their law? Oh, you said a high tide mark?
High tide kind of mark. So you can at least walk up and down these beaches, even though you can't swim in them, Jim. Let's go to Linda in Marblehead. What do you think, Linda?
Hey, Linda.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Long-time listener. Love your show.
Thanks.
I'm calling. I would echo what the gentleman just said before, that I think parking restrictions are a real problem. And I'm going to target Singing Beach in Manchester.
Oh, that's a beautiful
I
beach.
swum there. I've never lived there, but I swum there since I was 23, so I've watched over time how they have really restricted parking to the point where you really can't park if you don't live in Manchester. And if you go to the top of the beach where there is parking for Manchester residents, you might, if you're lucky, if you go really early, pay $20 or $25 and get to park, and then there's a $1 walk-on fee to that. Now there's a train that is at the bottom of where the beach is, and when I was young, there used to be kids that were from Roxbury and different places in Boston who would come to the beach on the train, and I haven't seen that in years. So it's extremely restrictive, and I can't swim there anymore. And that's, to me, really inappropriate. That's a very wealthy town. And there's plenty of parking at the train station, but they've just denied it over time.
Linda, thanks.
Whittled it down.
We appreciate your telling us what the deal is. Why is this never an issue in a gubernatorial race? Is it? Do you remember? I mean,
the
as
only
I said to
politician
Chris,
I remember talking
it's
about
Bulger.
Is Bulger, and now you get Julian Sear and the other gentleman that's pushing the bill up at the State House. But it's very difficult to get done. We have one more call here. We squeeze in Frank from Westport. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Frank.
Hey,
Frank.
how you doing?
Good.
Yeah. Get off the speaker here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Jim, you should have me on a hotline because you got a lot of questions, and
You need answers, and I give you the answer quickly.
What is it?
Joe Biden, I think he wears the sunglasses to look cool.
Maybe.
Right?
Yeah.
It's why he wears those funny, ill-fitting suits with the high waters, Marjorie, I knew she'd love that. She loves to laugh.
Yeah.
He wears the tight-fitting jacket, you can barely button it in the front.
Hey, he's pretty fit for a 79-year-old, Frank, as opposed to that other guy.
I know, you got to defend him. What other guy?
Whatever.
George Bush? You mean? Yeah.
No, I meant the other guy.
So, Frankie, you got anything about the beaches, or were we just going to talk about Joe Biden?
Horseneck, I got plenty of stuff on the beaches.
Yeah.
The lifeguard there, 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. There's, you can go to Horseneck, the best beach in the state. If you don't own the property, if you got beachfront property, you paid for it. You own it. It's historical. I don't know. They set up rules. At the end of my road where I live, they have the same rules in the deed that says you can go there to collect seaweed, do all these other things you talked about, industrial use, but very few mentions of recreational use. The lady that talked about people dragging their beach toys down to the beach. She's absolutely right. These people set up camps on beaches, and if it's a public beach, fine. But if you're doing that on someone's private property, it's no good. It's not. They're going to leave garbage and.
Okay,
I
Frank,
you
got a swank waterfront piece of property down in Westport, I take it, on the beach.
Yeah.
Wow.
On the beach.
Really? You're going to invite us down?
Private beach.
When should I stop by, Frank?
I don't even want to say this, Jim. Look, you come down anytime. You can come down anytime.
I don't think I will, if you know what I mean, Frank.
No, you can come anytime. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
How's never is never good for you. Hey, Frank, excellent call. Thank you. Call us again anytime and enjoy the beach down there in Westport.
Okay, we are moving on. We're going to talk to our food man.
We're going to stay on this issue, though, with Chris Burrell. I mean, and ask elected officials about this. It's a big deal.
It is a big deal, but I think we know how far we're going to get with this.
Which is, as far as we get with every other crusade we're involved in?
People's property rights, Jim. You know what I mean?
See the lead editorial in the Globe today?
It's about the 5-month vacation of the
and
state
that the
legislature
should come back. I wonder who's been talking about that.
You know what? Jim Brody gets action.
Thank you very much.
He speaks, and Beacon Hill shakes with its boots.
They're shaking. By the way, you know where they're shaking? In Westport. That's where they're shaking, because that's where Beacon Hill is right now.
I was at Horseneck Beach. It was all rocky. I was very upset about it. Coming up, food policy writer Corby Kummer joins us on Hulu, the big hit, The Bear, and what it says about working in restaurants or working anywhere. Corby Kummer is next. You listen to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
The race for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, and state auditor are all on the ballot in November's election. And with primary day just weeks away, GBH News is hosting a series of debates to help you familiarize yourself with the candidates. Join us Wednesday at 6:30 for the Secretary of State debate with Tanisha Sullivan and Bill Galvin here on GBH 89.7 and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Direct Tire and Auto Service, committed to transparency in the auto repair business. Their team will text videos on the vehicle inspection process to help you understand the work they are considering. DirectTire.com. And the Museum of Science, where you can discover something new each time you visit. Summertime is limited, though your experiences at the Museum of Science are not. Tickets at mos.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, and we have air conditioning here if you're interested. Joining us now in person is food policy writer Corby Kummer. Corby's the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at the Atlantic, and senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Welcome, Corby Kummer.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie.
Hey to you.
Hey, Corby Kummer, great to talk to you. So let's talk about The Bear, this show on Hulu, which seems to have taken people by storm. We had the great actress yesterday, Io. Debris, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Who was a real hot ticket, who was one of the stars in the show. But why has this show so resonated with people?
There's lots of interesting theories about it. I've seen a couple of episodes, and it's the stress, it's the nonstop pace of restaurants, it's the desire to excel. It's a family coming together. They're dysfunctional, but they're incredibly committed, and they can't stop working, and they all want to succeed in their different ways. But it's the stress and the toxicity that is really fascinating to people. It's kind of a continuation of Jim's favorite Anthony Bourdain, Kitchen Confidential, which is, this is an incredibly tough place to work, but you can be a badass and super cool and excel.
You didn't comment on the show itself, which suggests to me that you're not as impressed as the average viewer.
No, I'm not as taken by that world as people who haven't been exposed to it are. I admire the dramatic pacing of it. I haven't seen the whole thing, but there's so many interesting essays about it, especially the idea that it is standing in for lots of dysfunction in workplace right now. The stress everyone is under, the idea that the rich are getting richer, the poor are just barely scraping by. And even if we hear, it's a seller's market, everybody's leaving these jobs, it's really hard work when you do get a job. And not everybody is able to just cash in and make a fortune, even if they work really hard. And I thought that was a really good essay that you found in the New York Times Magazine.
Well, not only did we find the essay in the New York Times, and I hadn't thought about why I'd liked it as much, and when I read that, I realized that was exactly why, because it's not just about restaurants, it's about modern work life. When we mentioned that to Io yesterday, she said, asked, have you read it? And she said the whole staff, the whole cast sat down and talked about it in a meeting they had the other day about whether or not that was what the thing was about. And she said, yeah. We also asked her, by the way, because I do want to do a favor for Marjorie.
That's right.
About the co-star, Jeremy Allen White, who plays Carmy, who's the lead chef there in The Bear, and what most of America is talking about, which are his very blue eyes. Here's that. I want you to know, Marjorie wanted to talk about Carmy's blue eyes, and we're out of time. So I'll have to wait till next time, okay?
They're even bluer in person.
They can't be much bluer than they look in television. I think this thing is great. And also on the narrow restaurant thing, Marjorie's worked in restaurants. I worked in the restaurants I worked in were much bigger as opposed to the little tiny kind of thing. Actually, I've never asked you. Did you ever work in a restaurant?
No, I'm an imposter.
Wow. That's sort of like Bruce Springsteen. In his play, when he's doing this Broadway thing, which I didn't see on Broadway, but I did see on HBO or something, and he says, write the song about factories and how tough the work is in the factories. It's huge shit. I've never been in a factory in my life, he says.
Yeah.
So I've spent nights in kitchens helping out and being pathetic and inefficient.
And are you a decent cook? I don't even know that, I realized.
I'm a good follower of instructions. I'm quite expert on that.
I'm a follower of instructions, too.
You were to the Catskills, that's what you're talking about, right?
Well, I was in the Catskills, when the Catskills were a big deal, which they were decades and decades and decades ago, until flights became cheap, and then the Catskills suffered a sort of slow death. We're talking to Corby Kummer.
Okay, Corby, this is going to be my favorite story in weeks. Apparently, Cracker Barrel, it's a chain restaurant, lots of people know about this, decided that they kind of wanted to offer something besides sausage and bacon and all that kind of stuff. And they added a little sausage made from plants, and they put a little flag on it to identify that it was Impossible sausage made from plants on their breakfast menu. And the you-know-what totally hit the fan. People went bananas. In a bad way.
So this must be your favorite story because you are the woman who spat out a vegetable-based meatball
right here
in a grinder.
Right
here in the Boston Public Library.
So
obviously you're really dying to go to a Cracker Barrel and try this. So it's a culture war. The whole idea of if you want vegetable or vegan diets, there's something wrong with you. This is a stand-in for all kinds of obstructionist, overspending, liberal programs that nobody wants to support. Cracker Barrel is a place where racism has been safe for many decades. Only recently have they tried to be more inclusive. They've been really a bad actor, Cracker Barrel, especially in the 70s and 80s. They've tried to clean up their act. As an employer, just racism, not welcoming people, effective segregation by hosts.
Really?
Are there
any Cracker Barrels around here?
Yeah, they've had lawsuits. No, I don't know that there are.
I'm going to look it up while you're talking.
And I have to say, one of my students at the Tufts Friedman School, her grandparents were the founders of it, or great-grandparents of it.
Oh, my God.
They sold it in the mid-'60s, but still, she was fascinated and horrified by what the Cracker Barrel had become. But my real stance now is, if you're not Marjorie, who's being told what this is, a meatball sandwich, you won't be able to tell the difference, because they put so much other gook on these sandwiches and grinders that I really think the taste difference has become negligible. So people are only, it's like a red cape in front of them.
Well, what amazed
By the
me,
way,
though,
can I interrupt and say I have very good news?
What?
Very good news. If you travel 21.76 miles from where we're standing to Tewksbury, Massachusetts, there is only a 5-minute wait to get a table at the Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, there won't be after you've announced it.
You mentioned the culture wars. I mean, these are some of the comments. You have to wonder why people get so upset about this chain becoming too woke. It says, you can take my pork sausage when you pry it from my cold, dead hands. The fact that you sell stuff other than crackers and barrels is why I'll never go here again.
That was a joke.
And then somebody else says, this is the future leftists want, for the domain of all right-wing rednecks to turn on them and force veganism upon them. Next, they'll be donating proceeds to Black Lives Matter and trans youth, and then they'll be coming for the Waffle House and Walmart. You've been warned, the revolution is nigh.
This is a summer story. These are jokes.
They are not.
Oh,
you think that one is
No,
a joke?
I think the sentiment behind it is not a joke, but I think these lampooning tweets, because there's been so many culture wars about this, are exaggerating legitimate points of view.
Let's hope so. But it is true in the story that they talk about how health food has been associated with hippies. I remember when I went to California in college, they had all these sprouts, alfalfa sprouts, and they had avocados and all these kinds of things that we didn't really have. We had them, I guess, but I never had them back here in the Boston area. And it was thought to be, the long hairs were opening the co-ops and selling all these, garbanzo beans and all that kind of
So
stuff.
it's been a stand-in for counterculturalism, and there's a fantastic book called Hippie Food by Jonathan Kaufman, a food writer. That is really the history of this. His parents were big into this movement, but it has become a lightning rod. It still is a lightning rod for thinking, if you like that, you hate the former president, all you want is social welfare. That's what these people are actually tweeting about.
Did either of you ever get for Christmas or some holiday a Cracker Barrel selection of quote cheeses and sausage? Oh, I have.
No, I've never been there.
You didn't really.
They are. No, I not only have, but I would say it is as horrible as it is delicious. I mean, it is really spectacular.
You know what else is interesting? That
No.
They said in this story that chain restaurants that score highest on the conservative index are O'Charlie's, I don't know them, and Cracker Barrel.
I love that.
The most liberal?
Yeah.
California Pizza Kitchen.
What does that mean, most liberal?
It's some index of where people...
You mean the owners or something, or the
where they did these
clientele?
surveys. Experian Marketing Services apparently does a rolling survey of thousands, and they ask them about the restaurants they patronize and their political leanings.
I was really taken by that, and I started thinking, California Pizza Kitchen, who thinks about it, who cares what their views are? And then what I thought was, they go in locations that are very liberal, and it's where they choose to rent. Yeah, right here. Right
Is
here
California
across the street.
Kitchen there?
I think so.
Yeah, there has been forever, unless it closed.
Can we speed up this conversation, because I got to get to Tewksbury before the show is
right.
over. Let's go to, we are trying to be more environmentally conscious, Marjorie and I. Marjorie is beating me, I have to say, on a number of fronts. She brings it up almost every day. Well, wine bottles, which I had never thought about, which is almost embarrassing, because it's so obvious. Wine bottles, and I do mean bottles, are a serious problem, Corby Comer.
So here's what Eric Asimov's excellent, long reported piece in the New York Times pointed out. If you go to Nordic countries where they love vegan food, they also are 70 to 80% bottle recyclers. So they will bring in their bottles. They just do it because it's the law and the country can impose the law.
They're wine bottles we're talking about.
They're glass bottles that
bottles.
wine come in and they bring them back. And it turns out it's really expensive to recycle them. People don't bring them back. And a lot of the recycling is just grinding it up for pavement. It's not actually using it again for bottling wine. And I never realized how much greenhouse gas is emitted. It's not only the making of the glass, it's the shipping. It's really heavy. It's much heavier than other kinds of transport. So the amount of gas it uses, and there's been a shortage, just like there's been a shortage of everything else. But nobody in the U.S. wants to recycle bottles. So this story had a bunch of wineries, a couple of wineries who tried innovative rewards for bringing in your bottle to be recycled and reused. Nobody did it. They just aren't interested.
And is one of the points, what's the guy's name who wrote the piece?
Eric Asimov.
Is one of his points that if you are not talking about a wine that has to age and you have it for 10 years or whatever wine connoisseurs do, but if you drink wine that's relatively new, which most of us do, that a bag in a box preserves wine for a finite period of time, meaning a short period, like a year or something, as well as a bottle does. So other than the sort of sexiness of the bottle, as opposed to buying a cardboard box with a bag in it, that a bag is just as effective in terms of preservation of the quality of wine for a short period of time.
You know,
yes?
the more wine people you talk to, the more you realize most wine that's drunk doesn't really depend on aging.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be drunk within a year or two of buying it, max. It doesn't get better with age. And so, yeah, the glass bottles should be a thing of the past. And one interesting thing about this is that cans aren't that much more ecologically sane to manufacture than glass. They're lighter, but they're not that much better. So it's these bags in a box and boxes of wine. They look down market. It's large quantities. So they aren't very popular, but they are much more eco-friendly and people should get used to them.
We're talking to Corby Kummer, our food guy.
So we always hear about these problems with supply chains and shortages of things. I did not realize that there was a carbon dioxide shortage, which is imperiling the craft brewing industry.
So many fascinating things about this story. Like ethanol carbon dioxide is a byproduct of ethanol. And so production of ethanol went down in mid-2020 when people started staying home. And so did the production of carbon dioxide. But there's all kinds of effects. Carbon dioxide is necessary for dry ice. So summer, when you want your cold drinks or things are being shipped to supermarkets, dry ice. Lots of pressures on this market. And some craft breweries are able to pay the price and survive. Others have very limited margins and they're not finding it and they can't handle the price rise.
Can we talk about carbonation for a minute, which I don't know if we've ever talked to you about. I am a big carbonation kind of guy. And I used to drink seltzer, coffee and seltzer, 99% of what I drink. And I have 2 seltzers here and 2 coffees as we speak. I used to drink seltzer in a can because unscientifically I was convinced that the carbonation level was higher in a can than it was in a bottle. I don't know if that's true, but it felt that way to me. Then I was exposed to SodaStream, where you can carbonate your own deal. And the reason I do it is because there's 3 levels of carbonation, and you can press one of the 3 buttons. I press the 3rd button.
Oh, wow.
Thank you very much, which gives you the highest level of carbonation. And if I'm feeling really squirrely, I press the button twice.
Press the button twice.
So why is it, I don't think I'm atypical. There are a lot of people like me who don't want to get near, for example, a glass of flat water. It just does nothing for me. And I probably drink 10 seltzers a day. And it's not just, it's the bubbles are what attract me. What's the deal with carbonation and people like me? Do you know?
So it's a palate cleanser and it's refreshing. It isn't as effective to hydrate as the flat water is.
Not?
No, sorry to say, because there's less water. I can't remember what the mechanism is. It's harder to digest. People burp. It can cause gastric distress for a lot of people. And you have a fancy soda.
By the way, I only drink burp-free seltzer. I want you to know.
It says it right on the Polar Seltzer bottle. I see in front of you,
yes.
right next to the polar bear. You know, there's a sign coming out of the polar bear's mouth.
What are you just saying there about
burp-free. A couple things. First of all, if you don't have a fancy SodaStream machine and it's only got one button, you can also press that 2 or 3 times and get the same carbonation level.
That's a very good point.
And, you know, I spent more than a year of my life doing a cover story for the New York Times Magazine about bottled water.
Oh, did you?
And I learned a lot about carbonation, which is that Perrier and Pellegrino, or people like it for different levels of carbonation, all of it, it's pumped up just plain, and the gas is added back in the levels at which it would be naturally occurring.
Really?
It doesn't bubble up from these springs into the bottle carbonated. It's extracted just flat, and then it goes to the processing plant where they carbonate it. The law is, because it's naturally occurring, it has to be the level of carbonation at which, if you weren't manufacturing, extracting it, and probably, you know, ruining the earth it comes from, that's the level it would have.
You know, one last story about this. You know this. I don't know if you did. When I lived in New York and I moved from there 30 plus years ago, one of the great joys was there were no longer any of the glass bottles with a little sprayer on top like we used to see in like Marx Brothers things and that sort of thing. But because I got in early enough, once a week they would hand deliver 12 glass bottles of seltzer to your door for $1 a bottle, which was one of the truly great. Are you going to mock me right now?
No, I'm not going to say a word.
But she is mocking me.
In Brooklyn, there was the seltzer man. I haven't kept track since the pandemic, but there were 12, you know, big heavy glass bottles with the siphons that were delivered.
It was pretty great.
And if you want an egg cream,
look at her. I mean, look, you know why you're mocking me?
Why am I
because
mocking
you didn't have them delivered
I
to
didn't
your
have-
house. That's
I
what it
missed
is,
out.
right?
No, I didn't have the seltzer bottles. We did have milk when I was a very little kid. Put that in the back.
Well, did you ever have what he just mentioned?
No.
Well, what did he just mention?
The best drink on earth, an egg cream.
Do you know what an egg cream is?
No.
No egg, no cream. It
Chocolate
is
syrup,
milk and seltzer water.
Yeah.
Foxes, you bet.
Okay.
And you know that is not a
Marjorie
good
just
face,
made a
Marjorie.
face.
It is unbelievably delicious.
Okay,
Well, you
no,
have a
I'll
bad attitude today,
I do have a
Marjorie,
bad
you know what I mean?
attitude. That's right. Okay, Corby. Oh, before we go, we have a very upsetting story, actually. We talked about the food banks getting overrun during the pandemic. Now the food banks getting overrun. People with inflation and people, middle-class people. This was a story in the New York Times talks about people with these new Hondas and new Toyotas coming in to get food because they can't afford to go to the supermarket.
First of all, it's a long and really upsetting and really important story in the Times about food banks, but it was something that really caught my eye was in the very last paragraph of a long story. There's a woman, 44, a health coach, who also works for a dog retreat an hour west of Seattle with her husband, a supervisor at Costco, and 3 children. They have a combined household income of $120,000.
Yeah.
They live paycheck to paycheck, and they
my
cannot
God.
afford food for their family once or twice a month, and they have to go to the food pantry. There's a woman in Hartford who works at an assisted living facility, and she didn't realize that you don't just get what a woman, when I was volunteering at a women's lunch place right down the street from here, said, I don't
that's a
want any
great
of your
place.
used food. So that's what people's idea of food bank is, that it's commodity bad food. But this woman from Hartford was saying, I used to wear a big floppy hat and aviator sunglasses like our president. I wanted no one to know that I was going into a food pantry in Hartford. But it's really good food, it's high quality food, and I need it. So she's become big on Instagram and social media saying, don't be ashamed, go in and get food from food banks. But donations are way down since the pandemic, shipping costs are more expensive, and labor costs are more expensive. And as one person who runs a food pantry said, I don't want my help, the people who work for me, to have to rely on food assistance. I need to pay them a living wage. So everything is harder, more expensive, and more scarce right now at food banks.
Corby Comer, it's nice to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Corby.
Corby
Corby's the
Comer.
Executive Director of the Food Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Coming up, we're going to talk with Sean Ellis and Victor Rosario. Both men served decades in prison for crimes they did not commit. They'll join us on the important work they're doing to help others wrongfully convicted, because I think you're going to be surprised to learn, if you don't know it already, what happens when the state puts you in prison wrongfully and what they don't do when you get out. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, communities are doing what they can to prepare for this month's Green Line extension and Orange Line shutdown. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is making a push for higher salaries for city officials, and vulnerable residents are speaking out about dangerous heat inside their buildings. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Support for our programs comes from you and New England Dental Group, committed to helping you stop hiding your smile by offering a variety of dental implant solutions to replace missing teeth in one of their 7 locations. Learn more at newenglanddentalgroup.com. And Little Leaf Farms, committed to transforming the way food is grown in New England. Fresh lettuce harvested daily in Massachusetts all year round. It's the local lettuce locals love. Learn more at littleleaffarms.com.
Trusted. Local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marge. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Our next guests are 2 of the co-founders of the Exoneree Network, the New England Innocence Project, which provides support and empowerment for people who are released from prison after having served time for wrongful convictions. The Exoneree Network was founded in 2020 by 3 men, each of whom spent decades in prison before their wrongful convictions were overturned. One of them was Sean Ellis, whose story was told in the Netflix docuseries about him, Trial 4. Sean was just 19 when he was arrested for the 93 murder of police detective John Mulligan. His first 2 trials ended in hung juries. He was convicted in a third, and then years later, Boston police detectives who were pivotal to his conviction pled guilty to corruption charges, casting obvious doubt on evidence they found. In 2015, Ellis's murder conviction was overturned, and after spending more than 2 decades in prison, Sean was released on bail. Then prosecutors ultimately dropped the charges. He's joining us in person. Another of the founders is joining us on Zoom, Victor Rosario. Victor was 24 years old when he saw an apartment building on fire in Lowell. He says he punched a fist through a window to try to rescue people inside, but ultimately 8 people died, including 5 children. Victor was arrested after giving an interview about his rescue efforts and ultimately confessed to arson, but later said he was pressured by police and was going through severe alcohol withdrawal at the time. For years afterward, he maintained his innocence, fought for his freedom, and in 2014, after 32 years in prison, Victor's conviction was overturned after new evidence not only raised concern that his confession was coerced, but showed that the fire was likely not even arson to begin with. Sean Ellis and Victor Rosario, we're really proud to have you here. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. So I said this to Sean before the show, and I'll say it to Victor now too. I think a lot of us assume that if the government sends you to prison for 20 years, for 30 years, and they screwed up and they made a mistake, that when you are released from prison, they're going to give you a little help, maybe with housing, with a job, but that seems to be not what happens. What happened when you get out of prison in terms of help from the government?
Starting with you, Sean.
Yeah, so when I came home, after spending over 2 decades in prison, I went into prison as a 19-year-old. I came home and had never worked my way through a system, needing assistance or anything. And so I literally went from the courthouse to the care of my family. There was no checking in the probation department. Like the only checking in the probation department was to put a GPS on my ankle. But in terms of housing, which I needed assistance getting, I went from prison to staying in a room of somebody that I met through my mom, but I had no immediate direct connection with. And I stayed in that room for a period of time. But there's other individuals that get out of prison and have to sleep on a couch or sleep in a hotel room and
So
your lawyer also represented Sean Drumgold, who just died a few weeks ago, and what Rosemary Scapiccio told me, which I was unaware of, that Sean Drumgold was homeless for a significant period of time after he got out of prison after 14 years for a crime he did not commit. So sometimes it's even harsher. Victor, what was there for you when you got out in the mid-20-teens?
Oh, no.
We have a sound issue.
We have a sound issue with Victor.
Hey, Victor, can you unmute your mic if you don't mind, please?
Yeah, it should be done.
Thank you.
Oh, Victor.
There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Victor, what was available? What services, support was available for you? You got out, I think, was it 2017? Was that when you were out?
No, I get out in 2014.
14. What was available to you, Victor? Anything?
I come out in bail. I was in bail, but I have the family support. When I was coming out, basically my life inside the prison system, I was trying to better myself and all that the situation get to me. And when I came out, I was blessed because I have a place to live. I have a job waiting for me. I have an all when I came out. But also when I saw so many others that don't have the same blessing I had, I was wondering how I can help. And that was when the Exonerated Network started to begin. And basically Sean, Alice, and Ray, and myself, one of the founders of the Exonerated Network. Basically, it's a program that was created by us to design to help individuals adjust their life as in a free community, because I saw also that was a great need.
Sure.
I think that program was created before we came out. I think that a lot of guys that coming out right now, that they don't have anything, it will be a big struggle.
By the way, the third co-founder, when he just mentioned Ray, we should say, was Ray Champagne, who spent 41 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, recently died in a motorcycle accident, had received not a nickel from the state at the time of his death.
I mean, that's kind of the thing. I think, as I said before, you kind of expect that when they have screwed you, basically, because there was corruption or there was a wrongful conviction, and you go to prison at 19, that's a lot of earning time in your whole life that wasn't there, a lot of time to get married or have kids, do any of these things. So you would think that there would be some kind of technical training, some kind of emotional support, job training, all these things. And that's what I understand is part of what you're trying to do now with the Exoneree Network.
Yes. Like Victor said, I too had some support when I came home, and I still struggled with things such as technology-wise. Someone gifted me a laptop when I came home, and if I didn't have somebody there showing me how to turn it on, then I wouldn't know how to turn it on. And part of the power dynamic, if you will, coming out of prison, not having no independence, not being empowered to make decisions for yourself, you want to begin to kind of grow back into your empowerment. And so when you're needing help turning on a laptop, and that's something that's very simple, you people get real impatient very quickly and say, well, let me do it for you. And they don't mean any harm by it, but they don't understand how much that impedes on your progress.
But Sean, I think a person listening can say to themselves, well, I sort of understand if you spent 22 years of your life in prison, or 30 plus as Victor, obviously technology advance, you need training. You told me something on television a couple of weeks ago when you and Victor were with me, that even something as basic as taking a shower was something that you had to think. I mean, share with people what you said to me.
So it's when you're in prison, it's your ability to take a shower is restricted. And so when I came home, just like I asked the person that I was living with, Reverend Andre, like, how long can I spend in the shower? And that was a very real question for me, because like I thought that there was kind of still a time frame on how long I can stay in the shower. And so things such as that, like even I had struggles opening the house door, as simple as we would say simple as that, but the one time you turn it and it doesn't open, it's like you start dealing with all kind of panic and anxieties. There's all kind of stuff that people don't visibly see, but you internally are experiencing and dealing with. And that's another thing that we help one another with, is saying, listen, I understand. Like, don't be hard on yourself because you're in a supermarket aisle and you can't choose what tube of toothpaste that you want to buy.
Yeah. We're talking to Sean. That's the voice of Sean Ellis. Victor Rosario is with us too. He's on Zoom. Sean spent more than 20 years of his life in prison. Victor more than 30 for crimes they didn't commit. When they came out with Ray Champagne, who spent 41 years of his life in jail, they created something called the Exonery Network. We'll tell you what the web address is in a minute, that is funded through the Innocence Project, New England Innocence Project.
And Victor, what I also understand too is that the money that could be coming to you for this wrongful conviction is often fought against by the city or by the Attorney General, that you have X amount of money that they're going to pay you for your lost earning time, but people don't seem to get it.
The thing is, the money never going to pay, the time that I spent in prison. The money never going to pay that, okay? Because even when I came out, in 2014, even when I went to the supermarket and saw all the items that sell in the canteen inside the prison system, that there was not the price that was inside the prison system. That was a tremendous impact for me personally, because we inside the prison system, that the minimum is 50 cents for working even a whole entire day.
Yeah.
And come out, and then when you go to the canteen and spending $3 for even a soup, a ramen soup, it wasn't a shock for me. Just to see that in society, it was more, in prison was more cost the item that there was outside in society. That was one of the things that really having a part of me.
Sean, you want to say something? Sure. Yeah. Hold on one second, Victor. Go ahead, Sean.
And our co-founder, Ray Champagne, and this is true for every exoneree. There is nothing that's guaranteed or automatic when your conviction is overturned and you're finally exonerated. That's a process. And it's a process, and part of that process requires you to have to relive and re-go through. And as our co-founder, Ray Champagne, is an example of, he died
before he got anything.
And
we should be really clear, when Victor was describing, correct me if I'm wrong, Victor or Sean, what your family and the support they gave you. Sean, you described the support you were able to get when you got out. this was through individuals and organizations who cared about you,
Right.
not through the state that took 22 and 32 years of your life. And the point that Marjorie is making, to me, is the fundamental point, is a government in our name decides not just to take away your earning power, as we've discussed, but your freedom for half your life. And after they are forced to admit that they were wrong and they unjustly did this, they have no automatic obligation to attempt to do what they can to help at least you transition
Right away.
into the world. So this is what the Exoneree Network is about, right?
I'll explain how bad it is. That there is somebody within the Exoneree community that was released from prison and found himself in an unsafe living situation.
Mm-hmm.
And as the Exoneree community, the Exoneree Network pull resources and help the person out by helping to pay for the person to have safe housing for a period of time. I think like six months or so. But that's that.
Well, first of all, I was going to say at the end of the segment, I give the email address. The website. I want to give it now. It's New England Innocence, as New England Innocence Project. NewEnglandInnocence.com. Pardon me. Can you check this, Jamie? I think it's
NewEnglandInnocence.org.
.org/Exoneree-network. Is that right? I'm blowing the whole thing. Jamie's going to check it. Put it on the screen. I'll give it to you in a minute.
He's going to
NewEnglandInnocent.org.
.org/Exoneree-network. We'll get to it in a second. But it seems, and first of all, we should say there's some good news. Since we spent a lot of time trashing the legislature on the show, in one of their final acts, they gave $250,000, which is just seed money. A lot more is needed to the Innocence Project for the Exoneree Network. Is that not right?
For the purpose of the Exoneree Network.
The first state appropriation.
Yes.
For this.
The first state appropriation.
You know, Victor, you mentioned that you had a job waiting for you when you came out of jail.
Can I correct my mistake before I do this? It's NewEnglandInnocence.org/Exoneree-network. We'll give it to you again in a minute.
You mentioned you had a job waiting for you when you came out of prison, but a lot of people don't have jobs waiting for them when they come out of prison. And if you've been in prison for 20 or 30 years, I think a lot of people aren't that keen on hiring you, and also you have not been trained and up to date on the technology that that we've all gotten caught up on during the time you've been incarcerated. So what kind of jobs have your fellow prisoners that have been exonerated gotten? It must be a struggle.
It is a struggle. I don't know. For me, it has been, my mind has been like a sponge, I can say it. That trying to get to the place where I want to get there. The technology, when I went in, was this iPhone, the computers that we have today. Was for me personally. I never see it before.
Yeah.
And now when I was inside the prison system. I remember that I was in Bay State Correctional Facility. They having what they call introduction of computer. And I get a course of the introduction of computer, the basic. But what happened is that only you got that in books, no in practice. And it's different when you have something in practice, or have the knowledge in your head, but not having the practice. And that is creating a big problem. That's the reason why the Exonerated Network is trying to help the brothers when they come out from the prison system, to help them and give you the support that they need. That's basically what I experienced. But for me, it has been like my adjustment to society is like my curiosity to see the things that I never see before.
Sean, what do you want to say?
And oftentimes when we start working at entry wages. Exactly. And so the entry wages versus the cost of living doesn't add up. There is currently somebody that I know personally in the Exoneree community that that can't find a job, so he had to take a job getting paid under the table. Thus, he's getting paid below his value, and that same person is having a problem signing up for health care. And so he can't get the proper health care, he can't get the mental health treatment, and he can't get housing.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, I cannot imagine what it is like to be in prison for 2 days, never mind for all these years, and never mind for a crime I didn't commit. So,
and also thinking you may have to spend the rest of your life there.
Yeah. So there's going to be some significant mental health issues in prison, then when you get out of prison. So there's not money for that either.
No. There isn't, and so the last time that we was on a show, it's like you had asked about the $250,000, and that is a start, and we are thankful for that. But it's if someone can't get health care, then in order to get counseling, then you have to pay for that, and that costs money.
You know, can I just say something to both Sean Ellis and Victor Rosario? First of all, what you're doing is spectacular.
It is.
But the notion that you and the New England Innocence Project have to do this as individuals and private sector people, where again, the legislature gave you $250,000, which with all due respect to them is a drop in the bucket. If people care about this issue, and I hope most of our listeners do, not only should you investigate the Exoneree Network and hopefully contribute if you can in whatever way you can, we also have to talk to candidates who are running for office this year to talk about how a person should be compensated when the state has taken away their freedom for decades and decades and decades. I'll just tell you, Rosemary Scapiccio, the night before you guys were both on, who represented Sean Ellis and Sean Drumgold. Sean Drumgold was in prison for 14 years. It took him 12 years after he got out to get a nickel from the city of Boston, because the city of Boston fought him at every single turn, even though they were responsible for this guy losing 14 years of his life. It's unconscionable. So before we go, Sean, just if people weren't tuned in the beginning, explain the kinds of services one more time that the Exoneree Network provides to people like you and others of your colleagues.
So the services that we provide, one of the important ones is a sense of community, a safe, non-judgmental community. But we also provide tech training. We provide a laptop, a cell phone, some pocket money that can't be understated, because people have to buy toiletries. They don't even have money to buy toothpaste and deodorant. We provide guidance through the mental health field, trying to get medical care, birth certificates, Social Security. Just we run the gamut of things that we try to provide people in the exoneree community.
Well, Victor and Sean and Ray, who is no longer with us, you've done a great service for your fellow men and women, and we urge everybody listening to support it in any way we can. And we give you our commitment that we are going to put pressure on legislators and would-be elected officials here to see where they are on bringing some justice to people who have had injustice take away years of their life. So we thank you both for your work and really thank you for your time. Sean Ellis and Victor Rosario. Thank you much,
It is the Exoneree Network of the New England Innocence Project. The website is newenglandinnocence.org/exoneree-network, and Exoneree is EXONEREE network. Thank you very much, both
Victor, thanks. Good to see you.
And Sean,
Thank you, Sean. It's great to see you.
We really appreciate it. Coming up, CNN's John King zooms into the Boston Public Library with his take on the Mar-a-Lago FBI raid. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
And
Support for GBH comes from you. And The Curated Curl, presenting So Fully Textured, a natural hair festival, an afternoon of community and conversation, August 13th on Martha's Vineyard. So Fully Textured is proud to partner with GBH. More at thecuratedcurl.com. And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Patrick Kelly, Runway of Love, a celebration of the brief life and creative genius of a self-taught designer who transformed fashion. On view now, PEM.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now on Zoom by John King. John, of course, is CNN's chief national correspondent and host of Inside Politics, weekdays at noon. Hello there, John King.
Absolutely nothing to talk about today.
Exactly.
Nothing
Right.
to talk about today. No, I mean, it was a total shocker. I mean, I got the news alert on my phone last night, was watching you guys on CNN. What is the latest on the agents at Mar-a-Lago looking for missing documents that the president took out of the White House?
So I think it's important, if possible, I'm not sure it is possible because of the people it involves, to have sort of two conversations, right? One is the substance, and one is the politics. The substance is this is unprecedented. The former president's home, the former president's office at Mar-a-Lago was searched by FBI agents, and I'm sure we're going to get to the politics. But before you listen to the political debate, just remember how hard it is to get it. You know, this is the former president of the United States. They had to go to a judge, present a probable cause warrant, probable cause affidavit to support the warrant, essentially saying we believe there's evidence of a crime, evidence of criminal activity. You cannot just say, you know, we kind of think something's happening. We want to go search Donald Trump's house. It doesn't work that way. So this is a huge deal. He has been in a dispute, we know, going back to May 2021, a few months after he left office, over these 15 boxes or so of documents that it turns out he took from the White House to Mar-a-Lago, some of them classified. FBI agents actually visited Mar-a-Lago in June. We know that from our great reporters here at CNN, and we're trying to resolve this. And so they were there in June, and now they're back in August with a warrant and searching the safe and getting access to his personal office there, in addition to his quarters as well. That tells you that somehow the negotiations about voluntarily getting the documents back collapsed, or a trust issue emerged, and they were able to convince a federal magistrate to give them a search warrant. That is a huge legal deal. What comes of it? We have to wait now. A lot of pressure on the Justice Department to explain this, but I think, you know, waiting for that, you better be able to hold your breath for a long time because it's a sensitive investigation and they tend to be quiet.
Well, you know, that's exactly where I was going to go. As we learned last night at your network, is we know about this not because of the Justice Department telling us, but because Donald Trump put out a statement. And since I assume, John King, we're not going to hear from the Justice Department explaining their action anytime soon, the territory is totally open to Donald Trump and his allies to explain this in any fashion they choose. And while some of our callers earlier when we discussed this were joyful, there were, I don't know, an equal number. There were a number who were convinced that this totally plays into Donald Trump's hands politically. Where do you fall on this?
I think we don't know. And I think we need to be very careful, number one, when we're talking about the substance of the investigation, to state what we do know and then ask questions or say we don't quite know this. Like, for example, the search warrant was served 92 days before a midterm election. Does that tell us that Merrick Garland either has a 90-day or a 60-day? Different people at the Justice Department will give you a different answer whether they think the line is drawn hard, if you will. And he's trying to, you know, he believed it was time to serve this warrant, but wanted to have some time between now and the election. I think that's a fair thing to talk about. In the political realm, I do think it'd be interesting to see, you know, Kevin McCarthy is already saying, if I'm elected speaker, Republicans control the House, Merrick Garland, save your documents and clear your calendar. We're going to call you in here for oversight. He already said, again, he has no facts about what happened. He does not have the warrant. He knows nothing about the substance of the investigation, but he says this is an intolerable weaponization of the Justice Department. So that's the politics, right? And welcome to that. Does that help the Republicans? Jim, let me posit this for you. I'm going to give you dot A and dot B. You can decide whether to connect them. The raid, the search, we're not calling it a raid. It's a search warrant. It happened yesterday. We do know in the last couple of weeks, Joe Biden just signed big legislation today. The price of gas has come down consistently. This is still a bad climate for Democrats, don't get me wrong, but it's a better climate. And some would say significantly better climate than it was 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks ago. Republicans see an opportunity here to gin up a base that might not be happy that Republicans voted for the CHIPS bill, that Republicans voted for the burn pits legislation, that Joe Biden is getting wins. And so it may be cynical, but you could see why Republicans want to gin up their base. I would just say this, we're 90 days to the election. So you may gin them up this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Can you sustain that through the election? And Democrats have a mobilization problem. We can talk about all the different issues on that as well. But this is T-ball, if you will. If you ascribe to the Republican, everything's crooked, the FBI's corrupt, it's a deep state, and somehow Joe Biden and Merrick Garland are political dirty tricksters who are, ordering a raid on Donald Trump's house to hurt the Republicans and to keep Trump from running in 2024. If you can believe all that, you're having a great day. We could spend a lot of time punching holes in that argument. So my job is to say, here's what we know. And here's all the dust.
Well, one hole, I should say, is that corrupt FBI is run by a guy who was picked by Donald Trump to run the FBI.
There is that little fact, yes. There is that little fact.
John King, I have never been a fan of Donald Trump, but I have watched over and over again situations he's been involved in, from the emoluments violations early in his term, right through, even before that with the campaign, trashing the Gold Star parents of you had them on their
Keezer
Khan, the father, many times, all the things he did, saying he didn't like John McCain because John McCain got caught, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he keeps getting away with it all the time. And I had this fear that what might be going on here is that you mentioned that there was this difficulty getting these documents back from all of them that they wanted from Mar-a-Lago, and maybe they just reached an impasse. And so Merrick Garland said, well, they've got to go in and get these things. He can't keep these because if it was something with international implications or anything that would be a national security issue, that the Justice Department would look bad, and it would be bad if they just let the president keep those things, not knowing what he would do with them, and that's why they went in. Because it is a crime to keep those things, right?
Yes.
But that maybe is all it is, and if that's all it is, I think for a lot of Republicans, that's a big nothing.
Well, again, you asked a judge to give you a warrant, and you need to prove probable cause that a crime is being committed, that there's illegal activity in the place that you are going to search. This place happens to be the home and the office of the former president of the United States. Look, there's a lot we don't know, and you raise great points. So what you have to go on is what you do know, which is that, Merrick Garland, former federal judge, very cautious conservative guy, signed off on this. Chris Wray, as Jim very smartly noted, appointed by Trump to lead the FBI. Trump called him a man of impeccable credentials when he named him. He later turned on him. Had to sign off on this. This does not happen willy-nilly. This is not some rogue FBI agent who says, gee whiz, I'm going to go search Donald Trump's house. It doesn't happen that way. These are serious people whose job it is to separate the politics from their decisions in the investigation, but who are not blind to the fact of the last 5 or 6 years we've just lived through, whether it's lock up Hillary Clinton or Jim Comey's mistakes and missteps and bad judgments as head of the FBI, to Donald Trump's weaponization of that argument, if you will. They have to know. They had to know. I mean, they just do know. We don't need to think about it. They know that if you serve a search warrant on Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, you are opening up a tornado and a chainsaw of political reaction. So you have to assume they decided they needed to do it. And so why did they decide to do it? They were negotiating for months to get these documents back. We don't know what these documents are.
Correct.
But at some point, they decided we need these documents, or they've told us, they've given us all the documents, but we have evidence that they are not telling us the truth. Something happened. In the request to get a full accounting and a full return of the documents, there were months and months of negotiations. FBI agents were at Mar-a-Lago in June. Trump stopped by the meeting and said hello. The FBI called back and said, you need to keep those until we figure this out and resolve this. I use litigate, that's court. But until we resolve this, you need to keep them more secure. And apparently they put a padlock on the room. So there is some huge trust gap opened up between June and the serving of this warrant yesterday. Smart law enforcement people would say that to prove probable cause, they needed a witness on the inside who told them something that was contrary to what Trump's lawyers were telling them. Okay. And they said, we need to go in there and get those documents.
Now, John, can I just ask a quick question? Sure. Do we have any idea, we know that they opened the safe, or they went into the safe. Do we know?
Well, no, we don't know that. Donald Trump said it.
Oh, Donald Trump said it. That's right. You're absolutely right. But if they did go in there, the safe, as the former president said, how do they do that in the FBI? I mean, do they have the guy with the ears up to hear the tumblers go? Or do they blow it up, or what? Do we know anything?
And this is, actually, it's both a funny question and a really good question in the sense that this is going to get spun up, right? Donald Trump says they broke into my safe. So let's assume it's an investigation of Whitey Bulger, or it's a tax investigation of John King. Let me offer myself up here.
Okay.
And they come to my house looking for documents, and there's a safe. Their search warrant, where would you put documents? Where might you put documents? Or, if it's
the toilet, you'd put them in the toilet.
John. There's that too. So you search the bathroom, and then you search the home office. And so normally you would say, we have a warrant, open the safe, and somebody there has the key and they open the safe.
Okay.
This took hours. They were there all day.
Yeah, maybe Eric opened the safe.
Was there. You know at some point, maybe this is a surprise. You come knocking and saying we have a search warrant. That's a surprise. But the former president or any American citizen has the right to call their lawyer, has the right to have their lawyer an attorney show up, has a right to ask questions during the search and to say, let me read that again before I let you go in here. So opening a safe, the FBI, if they refuse to open the safe, the FBI could have taken the safe or could have called somebody in to open the safe. We have no indication if they have a valid search warrant. To look for documents. You can hide documents that you can't. If you're looking for a stolen car, you can't look in the safe. The car's not in the safe, right? But if you're looking for documents, they can fit in a safe. So they have every right, if they have a legal warrant, to say open the safe.
We're talking to John King from CNN. John, one of the I admit I overreact to almost everything. But you have done a brilliant job through the years. We've been lucky enough to have an association with you. Every time we ask you a question where we're ready to jump to a conclusion, you'd say something like, this is one day in time. The election's a long time away. Usually you know the exact number of days. Joe Biden is on a big-time winning streak. Not only, I was just watching your station 2 seconds before you came on, they had the numbers on how far the price of gas has plunged from its high. It's obviously still higher than it was a year ago. We know about the slim down, Build Back Better isn't called Build Back Better anymore, inflation crushing act or whatever it is. The CHIPS thing he signed today, on and on and on and on like this. But virtually every expert who I've heard on the air or spoken to directly says it is likely to have negligible impact on at least the House race come November. Is history back up that analysis?
History does when it comes to the House races, in that Republicans need to get only a handful of seats. The Democratic majority is 5 or 6 seats. And so the Republicans only need to pick up, 5, 6, 8 seats. And then Kevin McCarthy is the next Speaker of the House. Barack Obama lost 63 House seats in his first midterm in 2010. Donald Trump lost 43 or 45 in his first in 2018. So history tells you the president's party is going to lose. The average in the modern day is somewhere in the high 20s, I believe. I don't have that in front of me. So if it goes by historical averages, Republicans will take the House. And so I believe it's important to lay that history out there calmly and say, if you look at the president's approval rating, usually the North Star of midterm elections, the Republicans will win the House. If you look at history, Republicans will win the House. And then I would just say in the next breath, but we have lived the last 10, 15 years have been an incredibly volatile, unpredictable time in American politics. So let's let people vote and let's see. One of the calculations that goes into that midterm historical analysis is that, midterm turnout tends to fall in a midterm election. And the president's party tends to be the one that's a little bit more demoralized because you haven't delivered on all your promises. Or you just won 2 years ago and you're taking a breath. For whatever reason, turnout tends to drop in midterms and the opposition tends to be more energized. Is that the case? You can find evidence of that. You can certainly find evidence of it looking in the rearview mirror at polling. It's a cliche, but 90 days is a really long time. To answer your question, I wish I were there with you and I could walk outside the Boston Public Library and walk up and down Boylston Street and around the Common and go through the public gardens and ask people at the swan boats, what do you think? Do you feel better today? Do you feel better now than you did 6 months ago? Not how do you feel, but what's the trajectory, right?
Yeah.
So the conversation in Washington, because this town is broken and they don't get much done, is wow, they've gotten a lot of things done all of a sudden. Some of them are bipartisan. The climate and healthcare package that the House should pass by Friday is all Democratic. There's no question that Washington is showing a spurt of production and work and progress, and that's good, right? That's if you're a Republican, you oppose all these things, I get it. But if you're Joe Biden, good. So the Washington conversation has changed. The politicians, especially the Democrats who've been frustrated, we've talked about this how many Tuesdays, about the internal fighting in the Democratic Party, trying to get their ducks in order. It's hard when your margin is 5 in the House and 0 in the Senate, 50-50, but they're finally doing some things and they feel better. The question is, do the American people, especially in the key swing states and the competitive House districts, feel better? I can't answer that question sitting at a desk in Washington, D.C., but I think that is the question as we talk to our friends and family and associates who live all around the country. To start asking them, how are you feeling? And even if they're a little grumpy, ask them, are you less grumpy now than you were 6 months ago? And if the answer to that is yes, then that still leaves me with a question mark about how it's going to go in November.
So before you go, do you know Chris Sale broke his wrist riding a bicycle this weekend and he's out for the year?
Yeah, and that means the Democrats will take 2. No. Yes, that means, for those of us old enough to remember the curse, I mean, I don't know what to say about that. He was playing catch the other day. We're supposed to get optimistic again. Then he falls off his bike. Go Patriots.
John King, thanks for your time as always. We really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Be well.
John. Great work
care,
at
guys.
CNN. John King is CNN's chief national correspondent, host of Inside Politics, which you can see weekdays at noon. We watch it every day. Thank you very much to John King for being with us.
We watch it every day, even though we're on the air.
That's right.
When it's on.
Because we steal all his ideas. That's why we steal all his ideas. Coming up, we're opening the lines and asking you, if the FBI were to raid your house, what would they find that you'd rather they leave untouched or not find? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library.
For decades, scientists have warned about the catastrophic consequences of human meddling with the environment. But now, emerging technologies called geoengineering suggest human intervention could stave off the worst effects of climate change. Is it time to tinker, or will we just make it worse by trying to reset the global thermostat? That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and New England Dental Group, committed to helping you stop hiding your smile by offering a variety of dental implant solutions to replace missing teeth in one of their 7 locations. Learn more at newenglanddentalgroup.com. And North Shore Music Theater, Buddy, the Buddy Holly Story, celebrates the golden days of rock and roll on stage at Bill Haney's North Shore Music Theater from August 16th through August 28th. More at nsmt.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Library, Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library. We'll be back on Friday. Elizabeth Warren will join us in person here for an hour to take your questions and have conversations with you. We're returning briefly to the topic that we started the show with and talked to John King about, the FBI getting a warrant to search the residence in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, the former president. According to the former president, as Marjorie mentioned, they opened a private safe he had there, and if they found other evidence of criminal activity unrelated to what they were looking for in clear view, whatever that term is, it is fair game. So for the final few minutes, we're opening the lines. We want you to tell the truth. I know it's going to be really hard in this instance. If the FBI got a warrant to search your residence like they did Donald Trump's yesterday, would there be embarrassing stuff they'd find that you prefer? they not? The number to text or call, tell the truth here, 877-301-8970 is our phone number. Okay, Marjorie, you start.
Things are very dull at my house, Jim. You know, and especially since they've legalized marijuana, there would be nothing illegal in my house whatsoever. How about you?
Do you ever cheat on your taxes?
I don't think you do my taxes for a long time, Jim. Do you ever cheat on my taxes?
I wouldn't know. I would know. Of course, I did not cheat on your taxes. I never did them. I helped you with your taxes.
That's right. That's right.
And yeah.
You have anything illegal in your house, Jim?
No, I don't believe so, is the answer to the... you ever taken anything you weren't entitled to take that you have in your possession?
I shoplifted when I was a kid.
But I'm talking about as an adult. Do you have anything you're not supposed to have in your house?
It's pretty dull in my house. It's pretty dull, yeah.
Well, we want to know...
Is it dull in your house?
As many people said at the January 6th committee, fifth is what they say. Fifth. I am betting. I don't know what the percentage is. I would bet you that I'm not saying that we have horrible felons in our audience, but I would bet that everybody, or almost everybody, has a little something that they shouldn't have, or a record of something they shouldn't have done. What percentage of people do you think cheat on their taxes? Since I mentioned a minute ago.
I have
about
no idea.
10% admit 10% admit
they do.
Would you admit it? No. So let's assume it's maybe 30%.
Yeah.
Is that true? You ever go to a party at a rich person's house, pulled something when they weren't looking, a piece of silverware, stuck it in your pocket?
Well,
I have.
You do hear about that all the time, where people take stuff from in their relatives' houses. You know, they see something at their relative's house, they take it, slip it out the back door, and then the relative comes over and sees it at Christmas time, and they go bananas. I've heard about that kind of stuff.
Well, also, I'm not going to answer any questions about this, so don't even try. Many, many years ago, I had a business where, how do I put this? Law enforcement authorities came in.
Oh, when you were a Provincetown leather merchant?
No comment, because they believed that there was a violation of law that had been committed on the premises, and in fact, they may have found something that they weren't intending to find in clear view, as Nancy Gertner explained to us, and they chose to overlook it.
Really?
But the point is, I did not even know that thing was on the premises until I realized after the law enforcement officials left. That was many years ago. Yep. The statute of limitations is right.
Well, let me tell you something. Regular Joe and Jane's, you had something illegal in your house that people came in and saw in clear view, you would be in trouble. The problem for the former president, with those of us who aren't fond of him, is he could have many illegal things in his house, and I still don't believe he'll ever get in trouble.
Maybe only illegal things. Let's go to Alex in Somerville to start. Alex, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. How are you, Alex?
Oh, I'm quite well.
Great.
Thank you very much for taking my call. If you raided my house, the FBI raided my house, they would find 2 tarantulas and a bunch of pleated jeans. But I think in clear view, they would definitely find a mid-century modern piece of patio furniture that I stole from my undergraduate institution.
That's a good one.
Probably right. So do you really have 2 tarantulas or no?
We really have 2 tarantulas.
And why?
A Chilean rose hair and a Brazilian salmon pink bird eater.
And why exactly? Cy Montgomery, we would understand that. Why with you? What's the deal? What's the allure?
Well, they're good pets. It's like a pet rock. It doesn't do anything. You feed it crickets, feed it cockroaches. It's fun to hang out with. They're very social.
Okay. Alex, thank you. The attitude is terrific. Thank you so much. I appreciate your call. 877-301-8970.
Laura from Lexington says, oh my God, I actually have something in my house and I'm still so humiliated. I stole almost 50 years ago.
What was that?
And I intended to give it back, but I don't know when. She doesn't say what it is.
You know who I think Laura from Lexington is our old friend from Laura, who left town for a couple of decades and now has returned.
Is that why she had to leave town?
Maybe that's the... TR, and notice not giving their real name. TR in Waltham, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show.
Hi there. My name is Teresa, but I go by TR.
Oh, okay. So you're not trying to hide anything.
Oh, no.
That's what she says.
I am sort of scrupulously honest. I'm trying to think of anything that would incriminate me. But what it came to my head was if they came and searched my house, it might make it neater at this point. It might clean things up. Or they might say, why do you have this many shoes? Something like that. It might be a self-help thing for me.
So no contraband, nothing illegal as far as you know, nothing incriminating.
The only thing I have is, from years and years ago, I used to work at the home office for Showcase Cinemas, and I have a couple of bid sheets from that, and that would make someone nervous, but not me.
Fair enough.
Else,
TR, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it.
Alex is so relatable. One of our staff members wrote this because this person, our unsigned staff
Alex,
member,
the first caller, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Said he or she helped steal mid-century modern furniture from her undergraduate institution. I think that's something people do in college, right? People take furniture that's why they have to nail it down now practically, or they have it all tied together because you take stuff back to the dorm, to have a little patio furniture in the backyard kind of thing.
Did you ever try to take something from a nice hotel you're staying in, and all of a sudden you found out it was glued to the wall or bolted to the wall, and you're going,
lots
oh my
of people,
God.
we talked to Chris Muther about this. He waits for the chambermaid to come
The
down.
mini lotions, the mini soaps.
Loading up on all the fancy soaps, but a lot of them now are chained down now because they know the people. Oh, I know what you've taken.
What is that?
The terry cloth robes.
Well, maybe. But the terry cloth, most, I don't know how I know this, but that most terry cloth robes in expensive hotels now have little chips in them?
That would be
so
very
when you walk out the
embarrassing.
door
Very,
of your hotel
very,
room,
very
something.
embarrassing.
And by the way, for people who are new listeners to the show, there are many things that Marjorie has said about me and to me that are libelous or slanderous. And the thing she started years ago, which I texted her early in the show.
That's right.
I was the assistant manager when I was at the University of Pennsylvania as an undergraduate of the Wawa supermarket. And what happened was apparently there was a lot of theft going on at the Wawa supermarket. And the regional manager came in one day and said, it was in West Philadelphia, he said, Jim, I was the assistant manager, he said, we cannot tell the staff, but tomorrow we're going to require them to all take lie detector tests. Now, it is true that I quit that day. Marjorie's contention is I quit because I wanted to be one step ahead of the law.
Exactly.
I contend I quit in solidarity with the people who work for me.
Yeah.
And I figured I was not going to be part of this, whatever that
You're
was.
lucky you weren't busted back in
the lie
Philadelphia.
detector test. Oh, I do know what I stole. Actually, but this is not. When I was, I'm sure you did this too. When I worked at Groceries, we were talking about working in a restaurant with Corby Comrie before on roast beef night. I would take like 10 slabs of roast beef and put it back in the freezer in the place where I was staying. You never stole food when you were, which would have been embarrassing. Had that place been searched when you were a kid?
Well, they used to feed us at the place I worked at.
They fed me too.
Okay. Well, I would eat what they fed me, and that would be.
You never took extra?
I don't think so.
Well, then I never stole anything from the Wawa supermarket.
Time for one more call here. Ann from Rhode Island.
Hey, Ann.
How are you?
Excellent.
By the way, that's my fake name because if the FBI were to come into my house, they would find my edibles that I transported illegally over state lines.
There you go. See, well, they just legalized marijuana in Rhode Island, but you got to wait a while longer, don't you?
I told you I was
got to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
No, but Ann makes an interesting point that most people are not aware of. I hope I get this right. I was in Nevada a couple of years ago, one of the worst experiences of my life, going to Las Vegas, where marijuana was legal. It was just to become legal here. While it was legal at both ends, because it is illegal on the federal level, you couldn't fly it from place to place, which is, I assume, what Ann was talking about.
One of the texters says, I have a bootleg Secretariat DVD.
You wish in your dreams.
I wish. I have a beautiful Secretariat mug, though.
Yeah, thank you very much. We decided today...
I just want to tell you, I had people over for dinner Saturday night.
You did?
And Secretariat came up in the conversation. I whipped out the computer.
Is that really
showed
true?
Them Secretariat at the Belmont Steaks. They were all speechless.
How did Secretariat, when you say it came up, it's like a passive kind of thing. People just started talking about Secretariat
My cousin
from
was
like
talking
40
about
years
seeing
ago?
Secretariat race up in New York State at Saratoga.
He was moving like a
Okay, enough of this. Okay, fine. Okay. We wanted to spend, I know where it's great to be talking about what contraband you have in your house. We wanted to spend the last couple of minutes talking about a local, an international giant who we were lucky enough to have on our show, David McCullough. I think most people know the Pulitzer Prize winning twice, author, historian, TV host, narrator, died in Hingham on Sunday at 89. The Pulitzers he won for Truman and John Adams, numerous other awards for his writing and TV work, including PBS's American Experience and Smithsonian World. We spoke with him.
And hold on. He was also the voice in Ken Burns' Civil War.
He was?
Which I think was such a big deal, yes.
Well, I'm going to get to him and Ken Burns in a second, but we spoke to David McCullough back in 2017 on this show to talk about his collection of speeches. It was called The American Spirit, Who We Are and What We Stand For. Here's what he said about how the 2016 election affected his work as an historian who didn't previously take political sides.
I became very concerned last year, as so many did, about this dark cloud that was coming on the horizon and the general quality of the rhetoric and dialogue on Capitol Hill and unwillingness for people to work together, and a real slide in the system. And I was thinking, what could I do? What might I do to help remind people that this isn't the way we're meant to be?
You know, let me just tell you, for people who don't recall this, he was on television with me right after this. He never aligned with the party, never took partisan positions, but he and Ken Burns, since you mentioned Burns, organized a bunch of prominent historians who said that the prospect of a Trump presidency so distressed them that they felt they couldn't remain publicly detached. To quote, this is what McCullough said, his actual words, Trump was a monstrous clown with a monstrous ego. And this from a man who never took a partisan position in his whole career. Coming from him was pretty impressive.
No, but he studied a lot of presidents. He studied a lot of history, as you mentioned, the Pulitzers for Truman and John Adams. And so he was a very, very wise man. And it also, what people talked a lot about, saying the obituaries for him, that he had tremendous enthusiasm for a subject. The idea of his history books being dry was not at all true. They were really well written and never boring. They were page turners.
Good. Just two last things about him. One, something I'm sure you loved, is to the very end, no matter how much he wrote, do you know what he wrote on? A typewriter.
A typewriter, gosh.
A typewriter, never a computer. And secondly, you know, people often ask us when we do events, you know, who's your favorite guest? Who's the best person you ever talked to? You ever intimidated? We talk to a lot of people with a lot of power and a lot of important work. And I have to say, for the most part, I think I speak for you, there's not a level of intimidation. I was intimidated almost every time I spoke to David McCullough, not just because, even though he was totally accessible and totally respectful, but because the colossal accomplishments and the huge intellect of a great soul and a great American. And it's a big loss.
A lot of integrity.
Terrific
anyway,
soul.
He has passed away. He was 89 years old. We thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. We are returning, oops, that's the wrong page. I'm on the wrong page.
We're back on Friday, I can
We're
tell you
back
that.
on Friday at the Boston Public Library, but I want to tell you, you can tune in tomorrow. We're going to have our NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan. We're going to have our national security expert Juliet Kayyem updating us on what's going on down at Mar-a-Lago. The Boston Globe's weed reporter Dan Adams, ProPublica's Will Sennett as well, son of Charlie Sennett, by the way.
That's right, done great work.
Plus, the New Yorker's Sarah Larson on the fastest growing sport in America, pickleball, Jim. It's taking over America. I want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Rebecca Tauber. Additional support provided by Gia Orsino. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jenny Bologna. And special thanks to our engineering team here at the BPL, Colin Cockrell and Angelica Marrero. What's on TV?
Well, as you know, on Greater Boston, we have attempted to do a debate in every single primary race. Last night we did the Democratic auditors.
It was great.
Thank you. The one race where we will not be doing a debate are the Republicans running for governor. First time a candidate in a primary has ever said no to us that I know of. Chris Doty said yes. Jeff Deal said no, at least until after the primary, if he makes it into the final. So what we decided to do instead was play the most recent one-on-one interviews I did with each of them. And then Adam Riley, a great political reporter here at GBH, is going to sit down with me and update the campaigns of both of those candidates with me right on the air there. So that's tonight, a sort of non-debate debate between Doty and Deal at 7 o'clock on Greater Boston.
Sounds great, Jim. I am Marjorie Egan.
And I am Jim Browning.
Thanks again for tuning in today. Hope you can tune in tomorrow. Meanwhile, have a great day.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the South Shore Irish Heritage Trail. You can travel into the past through 9 towns in Plymouth County. Learn more at ssirishtrail.org, funded by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. Journey into one of the last places in America where you can hike or